will read this.
All right. A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring February 2025 as Black History Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas the month of February is officially celebrated as a national event honoring Black history and recognizing the heritage and achievement of African Americans. And African Americans have played a central role in our nation's history, and the contributions African Americans have made and continue to make are an integral part of our society. And whereas the migration of African Americans to all parts of the United States and throughout the world have led to countless indelible contributions in the fields of science, medicine, law, social justice, athletics, the arts, government, and more. The City of Healdsburg recognizes and values diversity, equity, and inclusion within our community. And whereas the presence of African Americans in our community continues to enhance the quality of life in the City of Healdsburg, and the City of Healdsburg understands that African Americans have endured an egregious discrimination, bigotry throughout the course of our nation's history, conflicting with the core values of the City of Healdsburg. And whereas Black History Month calls on all our collective needs to recognize, combat racism, and to continue to build a community that embraces all ages, races, religions, and gender. And whereas Black History Month is American history, and where Black History Month is a time where all citizens are encouraged to reflect on past successes and challenges of Black communities and to look to the future to ensure freedom, equity, and inclusiveness. Therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby declares February 2025 as Black History Month in the City of Healdsburg. And
thank you, Ron. And so we have Rena Charles of Rena Charles Art Gallery here tonight to receive the proclamation. If you'd like to come up to the podium, if you have anything you'd like to say. Welcome.
push the button.
Yeah, push the button so you see a green light.
Got it. Okay. So I just wanted to say hello. My name is Rena Charles, and I have Rena Charles Gallery on Healdsburg Avenue here in downtown Healdsburg. And it's been there about a year and a half, but prior to that, I worked and played in Healdsburg for the past 9 years. And I primarily focus on local artists, women artists, and BIPOC artists, Black, Indigenous, people of color. So this is quite the honor, and I just wanted to thank everyone. For the past 4 years, I've been a board member at the Luther Burbank Center for the Arts, and also a member of the Sonoma County chapter of the NAACP, as well as a member of the AAPIC of North Bay, the Asian American Pacific Islander. I've just really loved the community here in Healdsburg, and to be able to part of it and to build it.
Thank you very much. We have the proclamation. Would you want to come up and get a picture with the council as well? Thank you. And Rena, did you want to introduce our next guest?
Yes, good evening, Mayor, members of council. I have the pleasure of introducing the District Manager, Peter Bonkrud from Marin, Sonoma Mosquito and Vector Control District, who will be giving you a short presentation this evening.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Council members, staff, I appreciate you giving me the time to come and speak. I'll try to keep it brief, and hopefully there'll be a little bit of time if there's any questions. The goal is to really tell you a little bit about the district, what we did in 2024, and maybe some of the things that we expect here in the future. As was mentioned, my name is Peter Bonkrud. I'm the District Manager at Marin, Sonoma Mosquito and Vector. Next. And we've been around for a fairly long time. Our district is actually one of the first in California, started in the San Rafael area, largely not for public health, but actually to allow people to live in those areas because the salt marsh mosquitoes were so incredibly productive that people couldn't even exist in the Bay Area. And so our district was created to start combating those issues. And then as malaria got connected to mosquitoes and the transmission cycle, a lot of mosquito districts in California pivoted towards malaria control. Good news is we did a good job at that. Malaria hasn't been in California since the 20s, but we've unfortunately continued to see diseases emerge in California that we try to make a priority of our focus as a public health agency. Over the course of the next few years, we annexed different areas, we expanded, and now next. We cover both Marin and Sonoma County, which covers 2,300 square miles, around 763,000 residents. And we're headquartered in Cotati, California, which gives us a good base of operations to get to both Marin and Sonoma County. It's a big area to cover with just 36 full-time staff, but we do our best. We try to bring on between 6 and 8 seasonals every year. And of those, we are governed by an independent special district board of 24, which is a very large board, but we do our best. We actually have a few vacancies. If you know anybody in the areas listed, please let us know because we're trying to always keep our board filled so we can hit our quorum. We definitely appreciate Healdsburg giving us and appointing our representative, Sean McCaffrey, who I believe has actually served on the city council before. So it's fantastic to have somebody with a knowledge of governance. He's been our president several times. He brings a really good solid base to our board. So I appreciate the appointment and the continued engagement with the city of Healdsburg. Next. So what do? We do a lot of different things. Obviously, it's in our name, mosquito and vector. So mosquito control is kind of the large priority of our time. But in addition to that, we also do yellow jacket control and rodent consultation. So we'll go out to a property, we'll identify the areas where they might be having issues with rodents and help the resident either give them information that they can then transfer off to a commercial pest control operator or potentially do the control themselves. Additionally, we do surveillance for all these different animals as well, so mosquitoes, ticks, and rodents to some degree. And one of our favorite programs is our school presentation. So you'll see some statistics later on, but in general, we're hitting over 300 classrooms annually with just one person. So really trying to get the message out to the community about what they can do to help themselves from getting bit by mosquitoes, ticks, rodents, yellow jackets. Next. So we follow integrated vector management. What is integrated vector management? It's a lot of words. So if you can take a look at that slide, but I'll pare it down to the idea of a toolbox. So basically, we have this toolbox, the surveillance, the data that we're collecting from the field is then giving us that information that we need to make a database decision on whatever type of control strategy that we choose or seems the most appropriate, most environmentally compatible. There's a lot of things that go into that decision process. But in general, the idea is there's no immediate exact if this, then this, meaning every situation is unique and every situation is independent of the other. And we use that information to drive any control decision that we make, which could include anything around that circle: chemical control, physical control, biological, preventative, surveillance, and public education. So what's our main threat? So we have just over 23 mosquito species. I have 22 listed here, but we actually have 23. We don't focus on all 23 different mosquito species. For most of you, the mosquito species is the one you just slapped last. But of that list of 23, there's only about 6 that are a public health risk. So we focus on a group that's in what's called the Culex genera, Culex tarsalis, Culex pipiens, Culex stigmatosama. A lot of Latin names, but the important thing is they can transmit West Nile virus, and that's why we're so focused on them. West Nile virus is still the main disease that our district is focused on, but there's a couple other emerging diseases that we do need to keep our eye on. Next. How do we do it? So we have over 25,000 different locations mapped between Marin and Sonoma County that we then inspect regularly. So depending on the time of year, the type of habitat, the focus of the species that we're targeting, it could be every 7 to 10 days, could be every 4 months, but these habitats do get inspected regularly to make sure that they're not breeding mosquitoes. Next. Quick little shot of numbers. So we just did around 6,200 service requests of people calling in saying they had adult mosquito issues, split fairly evenly between Marin and Sonoma County. We've done 2,500 in-ground yellow jacket nest removals, 401 rodent inspections, a lot of mosquito fish deliveries, and then as I mentioned, the classroom presentations, and we hit over 21 events. Next, please. I'm not going to talk too much about West Nile, but I will say that it was a fantastic year, at least in Marin and Sonoma County, for West Nile virus because we had 0 disease incidences of West Nile, which is fantastic. It's been a few years since we've had a year like that. I will say statewide, the numbers were also down, so there was likely just a general shift in the populations across the state. But the good news is in both Marin and Sonoma County, we had 0 incidences in humans, mosquitoes, or even our dead bird surveillance. Unfortunately, we did start to see some locally acquired dengue, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Not in Marin or Sonoma County, but down in Southern California, San Diego, and Orange County and Greater LA. Next. Our laboratory does all of our surveillance for us, and I'm not going to hit this slide too hard. Just know that we do a lot of ID of different insects, mosquitoes, ticks, fleas, basically anything that we're trying to identify and find some sort of control strategy for. The first step is surveillance. We also do tick testing, so we won't test a tick that has been collected from you if it's been fed on you, but we can let you know what type of tick that is. We test our own ticks, the ones that we collect out in the field, just to get a general sense of what the ecological presence of diseases are in those ticks. The main concern for us is Lyme disease, but there are a couple other diseases that we can assay those ticks for. Why do we carry so much about nymphal ticks? Because that's the size of them. Nymphal ticks are very small. So you have an adult tick, you have a nymphal tick. The nymphal ticks actually have a higher risk because of their size and also because of some really interesting bactericidal components of a lizard. So if you're interested in that, give me a call. I'll tell you all about the fun California fence lizards that actually reduce our overall infection rates in ticks. This one's on our website, so you can definitely go check out some of the tick surveillance areas and some of the infectivity rates of those ticks. Next. Rodents, as I mentioned, will come out, we'll do an inspection, we'll provide you with all kinds of exclusion information, show you the areas of egress where those rodents could be getting in, areas you can reduce your forage habitat, areas you can reduce your sources that they might be interested, but overall try to reduce the rodents that are impacting you at your home or rental or commercial property. Next. Talked about yellow jackets. We do removal for in-ground yellow jacket nests only, but you don't need to figure out which is which. You just call us if you're having a yellow jacket issue, and we'll identify whether it's one that we can remove. Next. I already talked about public outreach and education, but we have a variety of media that we attack, both classic and social media. So if you're on any of those platforms, please subscribe to us. We do send out a lot of good information that people can use in their communities and pass on to others also. One more. Great. I was going to talk a little bit about invasive mosquitoes. So as I talked earlier, locally transmitted dengue in the Southern California area. Why is that a concern in Marin and Sonoma County? Well, if you look at that red band that's stretched across California there, that's actually the now existing spread of invasive mosquitoes. These 2 mosquito species that have moved into California about 10 years ago, Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, started down in the LA area and have now expanded all the way up into Shasta County. We currently don't have those 2 mosquito species in either Marin or Sonoma County, so that's fantastic news. The less fantastic news is we are completely surrounded. So Solano County, Contra Costa, Alameda, Santa Clara, Sacramento, Yolo, basically Napa's still not, but beyond that, we have invasive Aedes knocking on our door. And the concern is with invasive Aedes that they do transmit those diseases that we're talking about, dengue, chikungunya, yellow fever, Zika virus. And if we get those mosquitoes in our area, the risk goes up for those diseases to be locally transmitted because those West Nile virus is a bird mosquito disease. Dengue, chikungunya, Zika is a mosquito human disease. So if a human travels to an area where those diseases are endemic, come back to Marin or Sonoma County and those mosquitoes are there, they can transmit that disease around. So we're seeing that unfortunately increase down in Southern California. And so the hope is that we don't see that expand throughout California. Next. Some emerging technologies that we're working on to help combat some of those invasive mosquitoes as well as our own homegrown ones, 3D printing. So we have a 3D printer. Our PhD biologist that runs our lab has been working on creating new traps for us. And that's really exciting because not a lot of people know about mosquito control, but even less create products for them. So and for us to find the tools that we need, we often have to make them or adapt them from existing tools. So once 3D printing came on the scene, it was completely built for us, because whatever we can come up with in our minds, we can make new tools for us in the field, and that's exactly what Dr. Fury, our scientific operations manager, is doing. He's creating a whole new trap that then we can print at any time and we can utilize for our adult mosquito surveillance. The other side of things is sterile insect techniques, which actually, if you're from agriculture, is a very old technology, but it's now being released in mosquito world. In Southern California, they're working with irradiated mosquitoes for those Aedes aegypti mosquitoes that I described. In the Central Valley, they tested the Wolbachia version. And then in other parts of the United States, they've been testing the self-limiting mosquitoes. Don't have to know too much about the actual technologies, just know that what they're doing is releasing male sterile mosquitoes so that they can breed with the female mosquitoes and hopefully reduce those populations. So it's a kind of an innovative way, but that's also fairly old school in terms of trying to reduce the numbers and hopefully find another tool that we can add to that toolbox. Next. So that was it. I rocketed through it, but hopefully I left a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Does council have any questions, Ron? No? Anybody? I had a question about who's most vulnerable. Is there a specific population that's vulnerable to the diseases that you're looking at?
So for the ones that are currently in California or in Marin and Sonoma County, West Nile virus being that, it is going to definitely impact, at least in terms of the health outcomes, worse elderly and young. For the other ones, dengue, chikungunya, those are a bit more broad. In fact, they do impact young and obviously, if you've noticed when Zika was kind of a general concern in the United States, we were talking about mothers and basically newborns and things like that that could be impacted by the diseases. So it really depends on the disease, but every single one could impact you regardless of your age or any other kind of demographic.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for the report and the work. It's awesome. I just saw Sean just before I came here tonight. So I was telling him he should come, but he had something else he had to do. So thank you
We're
very much.
supposed to be in my office tomorrow at 7:30.
Okay. I'm sure.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Okay. So now we'll move on to city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. I have just a couple of really quick updates for you all tonight. The first off is we are in the midst of our second atmospheric river of the season, so just want to reassure everybody that we're tracking that. Thus far, our forecasts have been for about 6 inches over the course of, I think, about 5 days in forecast rain for this system, so not, knocking on wood, not near as bad as what we saw a couple of months ago with a much larger system. And so far, impacts were not forecast to be and haven't turned out to be anything of great concern. It did start coming down a little harder this afternoon, and I saw a little bit of pooling around the downtown, which we know is prone to that. So it's possible we could have some isolated things pop up, and our team will be ready to respond as best we can to that. But so far, it looks like nothing of great concern, but you never know with these storms. So we'll keep watching that, and we'll be sure to get information out there if we think there's a need or if there's something we need to get out to the community. So just letting you all know we're tracking that. And then second update, just want to remind people that there are, I think as of today, exactly 1 week left to submit maps for our districting process. That is not the very end of the time to submit maps, but it's the deadline to submit them in order to have them considered at the next City Council public hearing, which will be on the 18th here at the regular City Council meeting. So strongly recommend to people out there who have an interest in submitting maps that they do so before that deadline, because the council will be charged at that meeting with looking at a whole lot of maps that have been submitted and getting into the process of whittling that down toward a much smaller number that you would consider at the second to last public hearing. So it really is the right time now for people to submit maps for consideration. We have had, I don't have an exact count for what we're up to right now, but I think we're quite a bit over 60 at this point. I'm told from our demographer that this is, for a city of our size, an extremely high number. I don't think any of us are surprised that we have an engaged community on this, but it has, for our population, it's been an awful lot. So that's good news that people are participating in this process. I know I was at a meeting last week with Corazon and a number of their clients, and I think we got 15 or 20 in the course of one night. So a nice burst. Otherwise, it's been slowing down a little bit, which makes sense as people have had their chance and they have gotten maps in. But that window's definitely still open. And lastly, I'll just put in a plug for people who maybe they've already submitted maps, or maybe the mapping isn't what they want to get across to us. There's also a feature on the website that allows people to submit what we're calling a community of interest. And usually it's a community of like-minded or people with shared interests, as the name implies, within the community that has a geographic component. And so they can draw that map for us, or they can just describe it. We've only had a small number, I think 4 of those when I checked this afternoon. But I've heard a number of questions from the council in your previous conversations about this, and I think that really could be an opportunity for somebody to submit to us and say, hey, there's a certain neighborhood or there's an area around downtown. We saw an example of the hospital in one of the demos before. There may be some really good insights there where somebody could provide one of those communities of interest, and that information would also be submitted to all of you in your packet. So that's a little bit different than providing a map, but I know it could be really impactful feedback. So just wanted to put in a plug for that and let people know that on the map drawing tool, I'm sure you've all seen all of the maps are there when somebody saves a map. They don't need to leave a name, but that map stays up in the system and it's possible for the public to review them all. But we've also started posting maps that have been analyzed by the demographer on the city website for districting, which then provides a little bit more background data in terms of population and demographics for each of the districts that people submit. So I know it's maybe a little bit early for you all to start digging into that, but for the community, it's out there. And we'll continue to post those as they come in. So I know it's a lot to sort through with a lot of maps. We are working on a game plan where we'll try to make that as digestible as possible at the next public hearing to facilitate a good conversation on the next steps. But 7 days and counting for district submissions. So just a reminder to everybody. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And so the deadline date is the 10th, is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
At 5 o'clock or? Okay, thank you. Any questions for the city manager? No? So then we'll move on to public comment on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest not on the agenda, but related to city council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the city council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Do we have anybody who would like to make non-agenda item public comment? Please come up to the podium. And make sure the button's on.
Buttons on.
There you go. Welcome.
Hello again. I just wanted to share that there is a group of art-minded businesses and art galleries who have gotten together and tried to revive the Second Saturday Art Walk. And it's been a little quiet. And after going to the town of Sonoma's Art Walk, which is, it's bustling and it's extremely vibrant and there's a lot of participation, a group of us are huddling to see how we can get some official support behind our Second Saturday Art Walk, and how we can, with our vibrant community, how we can get our town out and about to basically the shops stay open later from 5:30 to 7:30 and just get people moving around the downtown area. So once we huddle at the end of the month, I hope to be reaching out and inviting everyone. And we are really looking forward to our leaders really wrapping their arms around it and helping us get legs under this initiative. That's all.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone? Oh, so Rena, if you could go ahead and email the council about that so we can see about that, that'd be helpful. Thank you. All right, so we're on to the consent calendar. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Keep turning my thing off. Public hearings, we do not have any, but old business, professional services agreement with, is it Bril? I don't know how you pronounce that name. Brelgy, thank you. And Race Consulting Engineers for engineering design services for the March Avenue reconstruction project. Principal Engineer Clay Thistle.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Clay Thistle, Principal Engineer in the Public Works Department, and I will be presenting to you a recommendation to award a professional services agreement with Borelgi and Race Consulting Engineers. Next slide, Raina. So again, the recommended action before you is to adopt a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Borelgi and Race Consulting Engineers in the not to exceed amount of $255,700 for engineering services for the March Avenue roadway reconstruction project and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement. Next slide, please. March Avenue is a primary east-west route within the city. It serves as access to schools, healthcare, among others. The pavement has been sealed numerous times over the past 10 years and suffers from weathering and delamination of the multiple seal layers. Reconstruction of the pavement is needed. Many of the curb ramps do not comply with current standards and need upgrading. Opportunities to cross March Avenue are limited to a single crossing at Lupine. Additional crossing and crossing enhancements are needed. Staff requested proposals from qualified consultant firms and teams with relevant experience and knowledge to prepare plans, specifications, and a cost estimate. 5 qualified firms submitted proposals. Staff evaluated the proposals against pre-established criteria in accordance with the request for proposal. Based upon this evaluation, Borelgi and Race Consulting Engineers was determined to be the most qualified. Next slide, please. Staff reviewed the Borelgi and Race Consulting Engineers proposed fee of $255,700. Based upon the proposed scope of services, staff determined that the cost of service is reasonable. The completed PS&E plan, specs, and estimate will be the basis for soliciting bids for construction of the project. Construction is anticipated to begin in late summer of 2025. The proposed design contract, again, is for a not to exceed amount of $255,700. Staff costs to administrator the contract are estimated at 10% of the contract, approximately $25,000, bringing the total design phase to approximately $281,000. The project was budgeted in the 24-25 budget with an appropriation of approximately $2.4 million. The $2.4 million is made up of $700,000 in GO-Sonoma grant funding, $232,000 in Measure T funding, and approximately $1.4 million in SB1 funding. The final construction budget is expected to be refined through the design process as details of construction are finalized. Next slide, please, Randy. So just again, the recommended action is approving the professional services agreement with Borelgi and Race Consulting Engineers in the not to exceed amount and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement. That's what I had. So I'd like to just turn it over to questions.
Do we have questions from council? Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you for the presentation and really delighted to see this project coming before us. I know March Avenue is one of those perennial complaints from residents, and the road is in serious disrepair. So wonderful to have this coming forward. Wanted to ask you, with respect to the active transportation plan that we just adopted, there were a number of bike and ped recommendations within the active transportation plan, and we received a number of emails from members of the community regarding some of the specifics on that. I know you just said we're going to be refining some of the design details as that planning, the design work comes forward. Can you speak to how this project does or doesn't comply with what the recommendations are in the active transportation plan, or what the proposed bike and ped improvements are that some folks have been emailing us about? I think there's a disconnect between what you guys are proposing and what the community is unsure of what's included in the project.
So I'll try my best to answer that. There's 3 projects in the ATP list that are within the scope of the proposed March Avenue project. Project 72 was improvements for Lupine and March, so at the crossing to make improvements there. Project 75 was for city staff to consider. City staff consider the feasibility of implementing parking protected separated bike lanes. That was 75. And then project 26 was to do like curb ramp and intersection improvements at March and University.
Great. Go ahead. So does that mean that that's something that we're endeavoring to do within this project as it gets designed and scoped?
So I think the project is committed to doing, or the project as envisioned, would include the intersection improvements at Lupine and March. It would do the analysis on the feasibility of the separated parking. And then it would look to do improvements at the intersection of March and University.
Great. Thank you. I think just with respect to what we've heard from all the input from community and knowing how important this roadway is for a lot of folks, not only the people who live along there, but it being a through street, it'd be great to be able to have a future community input in some way. I know you guys typically notice the folks who live along that roadway. Is a community meeting at all planned as part of the design or process as this unfolds?
So the initial process that was planned with the project was just to do a standard mailing to properties within 300 feet. It seems that there may be a desire to expand the public engagement, process, and we could be provided, direction on that.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
So we are including some of the walking aspects of the active transportation plan, just not specific bike boulevard.
That is correct. The $700,000 grant from Go Sonoma was intended for pedestrian enhancements, so that would be the bulb outs potentially at the crossings, and then curb ramp upgrades where the current curb ramps don't comply.
And so there have been no new grants since we passed the ATP that would allow us to grab some funds. Because I know in theory it would be good if we had that other grant to go ahead and do this at one project, but there's no other grants available right now?
Currently, we don't have another grant for this improvements. The current SB1 funding, can be used for bicycle improvements if chosen. It would definitely stretch it for what could be done with the pavement.
So there's already a current bike lane on there. You'll be restriping that and making that more visible?
That definitely is going to be part of the design and is anticipated to be part of what is implemented. Would be a bike lane and then potentially green markings at conflict points.
Because it sounds like we're shovel ready now. I mean, this has been, I know the 3 years I've been on council, we've been talking about working on Marsh, so this is ready to go now. I'd hate to do anything to delay it in this uncertain times. So thank you.
If I just jump in on that a little bit, and Clay, please correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of the bike improvements, which we're talking about essentially flipping the bike lane and the parking lane, I don't think there's a major cost consideration there. We're going to be paving and restriping everything anyways. When the ATP calls for an evaluation, which we're prepared to do, really the questions become, how does that work in terms of safety and implementation? One consideration, for instance, that I've heard, and I don't have an engineer's background on this, is there's an awful lot of driveways, which is potential conflict points. So we'd want to evaluate what layout works, given that. will it impact parking? I don't have an answer or a kind of recommendation at this point. That really is the point of doing the evaluation. But I'm not anticipating, and again, stop me if I'm off base, that would necessarily result in a cost impact. I don't think there's really a money factor in terms of how we pursue that right now. It's just about evaluating.
And if we, just so we know how the process works, when we want to change a project and say add a bike line, that would mean notifying neighbors, giving them, what does that time frame looks like when you have to notify neighbors of changes? How long of a period is that?
So if I would anticipate the process would involve, a public meeting, probably some outreach to engage the public. There would be the preparing of the design alternatives, so there's some time invested there, and then there probably would be coming back to the council to make any sort of selections. If there are alternatives that need to be weighed, I could see that the parking. Putting the bike lane behind the parking and then buffering the driveways, there could be some parking evaluation or impacts.
So we're looking 4 to 6 months is really what type of time frame we need to do this type of project.
Yeah,
Or
I would
more.
say as short as 3.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And so I just wanted to confirm, you said that probably part of this, we would have a community outreach meeting as well, for input from just the neighborhood or entire community of City of Healdsburg? How's that work?
I think we'd look for all of you to help us with that at this point. As you heard, the original plan had been that we would do more traditional noticing and a request for feedback, which I think is more typical of a paving project. We get it. We're hearing that there's an interest in different features here. I think if there's an interest in having a meeting at this point, we just open it up. It'd be a public meeting anyways, and invite feedback from all comers. But we'll be looking to some degree to the council on that and your thoughts on what we should be examining and your feedback on how much flexibility we want to have with timing impacts, because there would be timing impacts.
I'm with Councilmember Edwards here. I wouldn't want to do anything to slow this down because it's been so many years in the making, and I drive home on March Avenue now that I've moved, and I think I'm going to need to get new shocks for my car. So I think this paving is really critical. I mean, and it's such a great opportunity, and we've already squirreled away a bunch of money to do it. So, and you got more from the grants for the pedestrian pieces as well. So I commend that. So I certainly always want to hear from the community, but I also don't want to slow down a project. So I'm not quite sure how those two things jive, but maybe we could hear from the public tonight. If there's no more questions, I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody who would like to talk about this? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Ted Calvert, Healdsburg, 45 years. It's a good question regarding do it right or catch can. I remember at Fitch Mountain when it became a open space preserve, and I was on the committee, and what the final decision was no bikes on Fitch Mountain. And whoa, can't have that happen. And so we had to get the community and 37 other cyclists that showed up and get it changed. I'm an avid cyclist, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Fridays, I cross March Avenue from Lupine on the way to Geisville, Cloverdale, Alexander Valley. And it definitely does need highlighting, for doggone sure. And coming back, the same situation occurs. But however, I really propose the second proposal where we have a bike lane, a protected bike lane. I'm hearing comments from non-bikers, people I respect very much community-wise, and did a lot of good things for Healdsburg, but they're alarmed at the cost of a bike lane. It's protected bike lane. There's one there in Windsor by Shiloh Road, and I can go on and on and on wherever I travel. And it's good to see, because I think it definitely makes it safer for cyclists, makes it safer for drivers, makes it safer for walkers. and it needs to be. So hesitantly, I say do it right or don't do it. It's been a long time. Yes, it has. And March Avenue is whooped. It's beat up. That's why we take that and, cross it. So I highly recommend that we do proposal 2, second proposal, where we have that. And also transparency. In the beginning, there was going to be bikes on the mountain. Then they took it off, and we had to show very strongly that shouldn't be, and it wasn't supposed to be that way. So I think if we don't do it right now, it won't happen later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Come on up. Welcome.
Hi, Mark McMullen from Parkland Farms, and I apologize. I arrived to the meeting late, had some late business. So I don't know if you've addressed this, but I certainly would hope that looking at this project, that there should be art incorporated into this, because that's part of what the Arts and Culture Master Plan asked for, was for the integration in these kind of projects. And if it is impossible to do because it is so late in the process for this, I hope that we can come up with some sort of procedure so that we can have art incorporated into these kinds of projects throughout the future as we move forward. So if we can use this one as the test case, and if we find that we cannot put art in this because of time constraints, perhaps we can add it later. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Judy Fujita. I live on Brown Street. March Avenue is a major east-west corridor, and I really think we should do this one right because it can serve as a template for other east-west corridors in the city. I strongly support prioritizing active transportation infrastructure in the March Avenue reconstruction project. I'm an advocate for safer streets so that more people walk, so that more people cycle. The project needs to include a protected bike lane with a parking buffer configuration as recommended in the active transportation plan. The design will provide much needed safety for cyclists and encourage more residents to choose biking as a mode of transportation. It should not remove parking spaces on March Avenue. I would propose traffic calming measures to reduce the speed limit on the street, such as bulb outs. I would ensure that there's clear signage on the street to indicate that the road will be shared by vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians. I would make sure that the pedestrian improvements are appropriate for deaf people, for wheelchair accessible people, for people with strollers. These upgrades are essential for creating an inclusive and accessible streetscape. A transparent public input process during the design phase needs to happen so that all residents, and not just those affected by the construction of the project, can share their perspectives and priorities for this critical corridor. Again, if this looks good, it can be a template for future east-west corridors. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone. Bring it back to council for comments, questions. Do we have any comments or questions? Councilmember Kelly.
Thanks. Appreciate the public input and all the emails we received as well. And I think this is a great opportunity to really put our planning energy that we just adopted in the active transportation plan into a project that's been long in the works. I know I've been helping to support Healdsburg and fighting to bring this funding to the city. And 2.1 of the 2.4 came from our SCTA battles on getting all the resources we need to our communities. And really grateful that we have Measure T and that sales tax that our community pays so that we actually have local dollars to match this. But for those dollars, these types of projects wouldn't be possible. So it's wonderful that we have that, and other cities are jealous that we do and they don't. So I'll just would love to see us try to have one community meeting as we get further into this design process. I think, letting folks know what's possible and what isn't, especially as you look at the feasibility, it would be a really good test case for the future east-west projects that we know may come down the road. But I definitely don't want to slow down the project. I know this is long overdue. We've been fighting to get this money so we could get this project done. I know a lot of people wanted us to get it done years and years ago when the potholes started to get deep, and it's $2.4 million that we didn't have before. And, seeing what's on the horizon, looking forward where these dollars originate from in the federal and state government, we might not have these dollars for a long time. So we want to certainly get them into use and get these projects done. So that's my caveat is I would love to make sure that we have the ability to share kind of what the design and the feasibility yield so that people know what's possible and what's not, but also that we try to keep it on track. So my hope would be that we could attempt to do both. And at the very least, do a Zoom webinar and invite folks to attend if you can't do it in person or whatnot. But I do think, given the size of this roadway, that we already have 2 lanes of bike traffic, parking on both sides, it's very wide. I think that there is a lot of opportunity there, and not, opportunity we might not have on other roadways. So my hope would be that we can try to have it be really incorporated as that complete streets project that we've envisioned. And I did just want to mention to Councilmember Edwards, the nomenclature around Bike Boulevard is the opposite of what we think it is. I learned that the hard way, that bike boulevards actually don't have bike lanes. It means you're putting bicyclists in the road with the cars. And this is the opposite of that, where we get bikes have their own lovely special area to be protected. So just wanted to clarify, because it gets very confusing when you, so thank you.
Yeah, no, I've seen a lot of the green separators that are popping up in a variety of cities. And I hope that when we do the community meeting, it would be more educational on a timeline of when we're doing these. So we would have been talking about these transitions 4 months ago, 6 months ago, so the public really understands how it's hard to do last minute changes on some of these things. And I would like to see them incorporated. I got some very well thought out proposals, both from the Art Council and residents involving bicycles, so that we know going forward the timeline that it takes to do these things. So, but again, this is time sensitive, I believe, that we want to get this going before next winter so that we're not doing construction at the wrong time of year. So thank you.
Councilmember Higley.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts. I think on the public meeting, I think it's got to be more than just mailing out the, something that people maybe glance at, or an official city notice, which doesn't get quite as much attention. So I like the idea of having some kind of a meeting, but I want the purpose of the meeting to be an informative meeting on schedules, times, parking, and the goal is to minimize the disruption to the residents and what's involved with that. I would not want the meeting to veer off into pontificating about reimagining the project and like, we can do this and what about that? And I mean, this is really the people that are impacted and the people that don't necessarily live there but actively use it. I think it's kind of an opportunity to educate. But I think we do need to do one step more than just the standard mailers that we go out, because this is a pretty important street to how people get around. The other, I do want to say that I support the parking protected bike lanes. So that's something like from my position, I think it's important that we have sidewalk, bike lane, parking. So basically swap it. Parking is important to me. Like I said at the last meeting, I think as people transition, not just to get out of cars, the goal is to get people on bikes out of cars from a healthy standpoint, but I think we all acknowledge not everybody can just get out of a car and just ride their bike everywhere. So I think it's important to prepare for the transition to EVs, and people need a place to park. I don't know how you would charge an EV in one of those spots if you're not charging it at your house, but that's, why we're working on a electrification program where people can charge their cars at work or at City Hall or whatever. But I would support the parking protected bike lanes. I think there's been a lot of study to support that that's a lot safer. I think we can mitigate the concerns, and that was a concern about the number of driveways on that, compared to like, say, if we had a parking protected bike lane, going right downtown, by the plaza or something like that, where you don't have cars backing out of driveways. You have a lot of storefronts, but it's just pedestrians crossing from their car to, crossing a bike lane. So those are kind of my thoughts, and I'd be happy to make a motion once you're done with your comments.
Thank you. Appreciate
Not to
that.
jump the gun.
No, I think the parking, the bike lanes that you're talking about, I think are interesting, but I'm not sure it's really the safest approach. I could see where the cars that are, so we're saying the bikes would be on the inside and the cars parked on the, I could see that the cars could block people from seeing the bicycles and that they could like turn into their driveway and not see the bike. I mean, it just seems like it's fraught. All of it would be fraught with a little bit of concern on my part as far as whether it's really safer or not. I'm sure there's studies that have been done or that we could look at. But also, yeah, I mean, I think March Avenue is kind of unique in and of itself because it is so wide. It already has parking. It already has bike lanes, and there's still plenty of room for 2 lanes. So I'm not sure that like Matheson or Powell or any of those streets could be like March. But so everything's going to be a little bit unique. And I think March will hopefully be sort of the shining star in the in this process. And it's certainly I'm glad it's the first one that's going to happen. And the fact that if we, things just get more and more and more expensive. So we get money and then we sit on it and then, says 6 months, a year later, it's now, more money to do it. So I think we need to remember that and think about that as well. I'm sure you guys are. So, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that you got money for the pedestrian and the crosswalks and whatnot. So I think that's all really critical that those wouldn't have been in this otherwise, right? It would have been more of a paving operation. So, I think this is a great project. I want to commend everybody on it. And I hope, yes, please make the resolution.
I would be happy to, and I think there's a lot of people in Healdsburg that are excited to finally get this going. You've been on 3 years. This is my 9th, and I mean it's been like a constant topic of conversation. So I would like to offer that we adopt a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Brelgy and Race Consulting Engineers in the not to exceed amount of $255,700 for engineering services for the March Avenue reconstruction project and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreements.
Second.
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. And thank you. So that motion passes. Thank you all. And thank you for the public comment. So we will move on to item B, discussion of potential uses of revenues gained through the sale of renewable energy credits, RECs. Utility Director Terry Crowley.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. So next page here. So tonight, the recommended action is to provide direction to city staff regarding the uses of and potential project objectives for revenues gained through the sale of renewable energy credits. So again, just looking for some direction from staff to give some ideas about, what the key outcomes are that staff or council would like to see with from the sales proceeds, and then maybe what's projects we'd like to, or council would like to explore a little bit further. So as background, California has a renewable portfolio standard requires City of Healdsburg and other electric utilities provide a minimum amount of renewable energy. So to certify that you actually produced that and provided that renewable energy, there's a thing called renewable energy credits that are produced. As an early adopter, Healdsburg built up a large bank of RECs These are termed as historical carryover RECs, which can be used to meet future compliance obligations. But it also allows the city to sell off newly generated RECs, since we have a large bank and we have a large production of renewable energy. So we have this excess. City hasn't participated in that process historically, but recently the prices for RECs have tripled due to a scarcity and the growing requirements for renewable portfolio standards. The proceeds are expected to be about $3.2 million in one-time funding. And then these sales, once we sell off these RECs, this is the kind of the downside of it too, is what we'll see in the power content labels, which are sent out to the customers each year, is that those RECs won't be counted. So whereas Healdsburg has traditionally a high level of renewable energy in those power content labels, for the next 2 years, you'll see a lower number there. Next slide, please. So to gain a little bit of insight from the community, we developed a survey and pushed that out online. And really what we were trying to focus in on is like, so we have this pool of money. What would be measurable outcomes or desired outcomes, performance indicators of how we spent this money so that we could develop some projects around what those outcomes would be, right? So we gained a short list of those, put out this online survey, pushed out the survey through social media, city managers updates, community groups, including the Climate Action Healdsburg, COPE groups, Corazon, provided hard copies of the survey to City Hall, Senior Center, and Corazon offices. Staff also met directly with Corazon to gain additional insights. And so through all that effort, 165 responses were received. So next slide. So looking at those results, so in the survey, there was 2 parts. So the first part was basically looking at goals and outcomes, like what do we want to achieve? And so we created a short list and asked survey respondents to rank those as, either required, has to be in there, or it's desired, or it's not necessary, or you have no opinion on it. And the focus was, do we want local projects? Do we want a local project that seems somewhat tangible to the community? What's unique about the city's electric department is we're very outward facing. So we own facilities outside of the city. So the geysers is close by, generally considered local, but we have power plants in Calaveras County. We have power plant in Lodi. We have contracts with in Southern California for solar plants. We have generation contracts for hydro plants in the Feather River Canyon. So we're very outward looking as far as ownership of generation plants. But this was one of the things we wanted to ask is a local project or program important? We also wanted to ask if there's a requirement for reducing greenhouse gases and how important that is. Ask for, what component of equity should be included into the design of the projects. Is there a need for increased reliability or resiliency? So system reliability, making sure the power stays on, and then also resiliency, looking forward to different climate events. How well is the system designed to actually withstand those climate events, right? And then also provide cost savings. Is there a method to look in here that would provide some type of long-term cost savings or have the ability to lessen the impact of future rate increases? And then also, is there ability to leverage funding? So is there an ability to reach out and grab grant funding and potentially double the dollars that we have available? And so we looked at the rankings of these things. And then if you look at combining both the desired and required, the 3 things that rose to the top were reliability, resiliency, cost savings, and local options. And then just following just below that were leveraging grant funds and greenhouse gas reductions. So next slide, please. So the second half of the survey looked at providing some example projects to help people get some identifications of like, hey, what would we potentially do? And then allow the survey respondents to rank those projects. We did allow survey respondents to pick more than one of the projects, but the project examples were renewable energy and battery storage, undergrounding of power lines, enhancing software features for utility customers. So this is, could be improved customer portals for paying your bill. It could be improved customer portals allow you to see your usage in real time and try and figure out how to manage your usage. But also could be something as simple as getting text alerts of a high bill warning before you get that bill in the mail. So halfway through the billing cycle, your usage was high, and so you got a notification. Could be also notification of water leak early on versus, after you get your bill. We also looked at potentially having municipal electrification projects, so going into city facilities and electrifying those buildings, modernizing them, eliminating some of the gas appliances. And then also there was either the option of providing some other project or none of the above. In looking at these, undergrounding projects and renewable energy projects drew the most support. Next slide, please. So it's speaking to undergrounding projects, which was one of the projects that desired the highest, drew the highest survey responses. The city owns about 7 miles of overhead power lines within the wildland urban interface. And so as we know, and we've learned over the past several years, there's a risk of wildfire caused by utilities when there's high winds blowing. And so that's something that the city has to look at and look at a risk mitigation there. Or the city also has to have plans to prepare to shut off the power when there are extreme winds and low humidity. And so this image here kind of indicates the portions of town that would be impacted by a potential PSPS event. And then, so it highlights the whole city, but the reality is the city is affected by potential transmission level. So that's the entire city, the kind of the yellowish orange that you see there. But then there's more focused areas that are shown in blue that have both the impacts of a distribution level PSPS event as well as a transmission level. And so those are some of the areas that we could look at potentially undergrounding lines to mitigate those risks. Next slide, please. So if we looked into there and we focus in on the area that's just east of the golf course and north of South Fitch Mountain Road, there's an area in there that's about 2.6 miles of overhead lines. And we could look at very narrow roads. It's part of the wildland urban interface. There's a lot of homes in that area as well. It has some of the city's older overhead facilities as well. There's a very high cost for undergrounding. It's, you know, the minimum cost is about $2 million per mile. It could go up to $5 million per mile. So clearly with the funding that we have available, this wouldn't cover the entire thing, but potentially could get a start onto it. Any approach to this would require a phased approach, and this image here kind of dictates those phased areas where we could go in and hit this area and then in a couple of years generate some more funding and do the next area there. The project would meet preferred outcomes of lowering costs. We do see this work as inevitable for the city. Sooner or later, the city is going to go into this area and underground to mitigate the risk of wildfire. So sooner or later, the city is going to fund this. And so it's either funded 100% through ratepayers or a combination of rate funding and grant funding, or potentially using one-time monies and a combination of grant funding and rate funding. So anyway you look at it, we do see this in a long-term 10 years period that the city would start on this work, or look to fund it within a subsequent rate study. So it meets that of potentially lowering the rates. It would improve reliability and resiliency, so it would limit that risk of power public safety shutdowns. And then it also would fit into as a local project. So we're improving our local area. Next slide, please. So the other project that was high on the list was renewable energy and creating local renewable energy. And so the city looked at, city staff looked at different locations where we could potentially develop solar with potential of battery storage at city facilities. City facilities, because we own the land, we have control over it. We know the conditions of the facilities and where we can move things forward versus working with a third party or a separate landowner. So we looked at the water reclamation facility, the Magnolia Lift Station, the Corporation Yard, the Community Center. They all have good potential for additional solar. So one of the things that we also looked at too is a water reclamation facility in the wastewater system itself. To treat water and to move water around takes a lot of energy. And so that's a big portion of our operational budget. Just for the wastewater department, it's roughly $600,000 a year for utility services. If we put solar at those facilities, we potentially lower those costs and in turn lessen the impact of future rate increases in the wastewater department or in the utilities themselves. It would produce obviously additional renewable energy. So there's a benefit there. But the cost range there is for about a megawatt is about $3 to $4 million per megawatt. We'd look at projects that could range between 2 to 3 megawatts. So we're a little bit beyond what the funding is, but there's a lot of grant funding out there that could potentially make up that gap. Next slide, please. So additionally, in the community outreach, we went and met with Corazon to really dive in and talk about what the issues that they were seeing. And without hesitation, it was utility bills, paying utility bills. There's a group within our community that struggle with paying their utility bills. They make a choice between groceries and utility bills. It's very difficult, right? And that's a challenging thing. And so that's what they face and that's what they see. And so that was the first thing they talked about. And so we looked at, what could we do potentially to help with that? And obviously there's a direct payment, can we just immediately reduce their bills? This is one-time funding, so that's not as sustainable. It would create a short pause there, but maybe that's not a long-term solution. We did look at potential software to support new rate designs, improve energy efficiencies at multifamily housing, or to install solar to offset electricity bills, which would have a long-term effect of reducing bills. The improvements to utility billing software could allow for a prepay of electric rates. It could allow customers to avoid disconnect fees or utility deposits. So that's one of the challenges too when setting up service, is paying that utility deposit, or if you have a mistake or you're tight with funding and you have disconnect, paying that disconnect fee on top of the utility bill, on top of what's past due, can be challenging. I'm not sure the percent of population that would actually participate in those types of structures, but that's an option that we looked at. The other option that we looked at is there's a lot of assistance out there, state assistance for energy efficiency projects, as well as for rooftop solar within income restricted multifamily properties. A lot of that funding, as we understand, goes unused just due to a lack of applications and initiative to move those projects forward. And so one of the things that we thought we might be able to do from the city and look into a little bit more would be can we provide some assistance with the application? Can we provide some assistance with the project management and move some of that forward to provide a lower electricity bill, and a direct benefit that's ongoing for residents of multifamily housing. And that would meet the desired outcomes of lowering utility bills for the low-income customers, but also it would increase local renewable energy. Next slide, please. So in general, in the survey, we offered some points in there where you could provide additional comments. So other comments and just provide things that maybe the staff didn't sit up. One of the things that was predominant there was incentive programs. And so a lot of the respondents asked for, hey, I want like an additional incentive program for this, or I want an incentive program for that. Some of those incentive programs exist within the city already. Some of those incentive programs exist at the state level, or some of those incentive programs are through tax credits that already exist. But just to try and walk through the programs that we have right now, so the city does provide electric EV charging. We do have a discount for care customers with those public EV charging stations. We do have a home energy load management program that we've launched. And it has a rebate for care customers so that they can also participate in this program. That load energy management program is directed towards thermostats as well as EVs. We have the e-bike rebate, which again provides a little bit of an additional incentive for care customers. We have workplace and multifamily EV charging rebates. Again, trying to develop more daytime charging when there's excess solar energy. Energy efficiency and electrification rebates. So we have heat pumps, insulation, clothes washers, cooktops, commercial kitchens, et cetera. So there's a long list there. Low income multifamily appliance rebates. So this is a project that we've been working on a long time to actually go into multifamily housing and replace the refrigerators, which is the biggest energy user, as well as some other appliances to improve efficiencies, commercial electrification support. Competitive excess solar compensation rates. So we provide 2 to 3 times more compensation for rooftop solar when there's excess generation. And then we've provided 25% electric bill discount for care customers. So not only are we 50% cheaper than PG&E, we add another 25% discount on top of that. And so these are all programs that city already does or has available for the customers. Next slide, please. So again, seeking direction from staff to prioritize the outcomes, or if council has additional outcomes that they would like to see within these projects. Again, the survey really looked at the top priorities as being reliability, resiliency, a local aspect, and some cost savings. Again, it's council's direction, so if you wanted to add something or narrow that, that's what I'm seeking as far as direction. And then also seeking direction on which projects, programs to develop further. So really, what could we draw a scope around and present back to council with a little bit more information? You know, what's the size of the project? What's the grant available funding? What the timelines look like? Bring all of that back. And so staff's recommendation is to further develop the scope and cost for undergrounding within the wildland urban interface, develop renewable energy at city-owned facilities, get some more information about that, and then develop programs assistance for low-income customers, really looking at reducing the bill and providing some type of lasting cost reduction. So looking at trying to do energy efficiency or solar, rooftop solar that would directly benefit the tenants. And again, we would bring these back. Obviously, there's more need than funding, and then we would come back to council and talk about what the priority is and what to move forward with. So next slide. So again, just for that, I would just open it up to council to provide any questions or comments or directions for staff.
Thank you, Terry. Great report and great problem to have, I think. Councilmember Hagley, you had a question, and then Councilmember.
Yeah, I was trying to find when I went to number. There were two. Sorry, excuse me. There were two items that were related to electricity that we presented. One was the battery storage, and I was trying to remember the prices on those because I think I got hard copies. I didn't get emails. One was $6 million. Was that the battery storage?
I think that the battery storage was probably a piece of the battery storage.
Okay. And then the other one was related to undergrounding that we had put in a request for, or that I kind of talked about with them. On the undergrounding question I had, and I think just, you know, because we're kind of impacted by when PG&E shuts things off, then we're kind of shut down because we rely on them for the transmission to Healdsburg. How many times have we initiated our own PSPS when PG&E hasn't for our specific lines in those areas? That happen quite often or not really?
It hasn't happened quite often, but what I will say is that ahead of the Kincaid fire, we prepared to do a PSPS event in that area, as well as shutting off some lines to the Gauntlet well field, Gauntlet treatment plant, just a remote line that runs up over the top of the ridge. So we actually, the city prepared, we did notices, actually got a lot of help from the city's fire department, the reservists to actually go door to door and identify and countywide evacuation, PG&E shutting the transmission off and everything else changed, right? But we did have that plan, and we do every time there's a red flag warning or a high wind event, we look at our system and we adjust settings on our system, and we haven't had the same conditions that we had. Possibility.
So I guess the second part is, I know that a lot of people just immediately think we need to underground everything. That's going to be the safest and it's really expensive. I'm starting to hear even more like certain areas it's, you know, not necessary, or there's other things that could be done. For Healdsburg, I'm wondering, because we're, you know, kind of subject to the transmission lines that even come to us, would it be better to focus on hardening and strengthening what we have there and clearing the wider paths so we don't have the debris coming into the lines, hardening the lines? And
yes,
like, would that be cheaper than underground?
So I guess the way I would explain it is undergrounding is the gold standard, right? That's the high level. That's the, you know, kind of gives you the confidence. And I think PG&E uses a number of 98% confident, right, that it won't cause a utility wildfire. We certainly work at, you know, doing our maintenance, strengthening our system, replacing weak conductor, and aggressive tree trimming, right? The city spends $180,000 a year on tree trimming within the city. We're a small city, 4 square miles, right? And a lot of it's in that area. Is that a guarantee that it won't happen? It's not, but it's the lowest cost way to manage that risk, right? But there's still the risk out there. And so you're trying to mitigate it. And we probably will look at additional clearing as time goes by. We'll look at additional, protection settings in our system to trip faster and avoid, putting a lot of energy into a fault during those events. But there's always going to be that risk if you have overhead lines.
And then the final one is really related to, and I've talked to you about this before, is, when we're talking about our climate mobilization strategy, and, I'm a big, not a force somebody to do something, but have an option so that they, encourage. And in that context, if people want to upgrade to an electric car or swap out their gas stove or do some of these other things, the existing panel doesn't support that. So in terms of, do we have programs right now that, like if you buy an electric something, then you can qualify for a rebate. But is there anything proactive that we can do to, maybe allocate funds to existing homeowners to be able to upgrade their panel so that they're kind of future proofing their house? So when their gas stove goes out, then they go to the store and they're looking at electric or gas versus, ooh, the electric's cheaper. I want to do that. Oh no, but I need to go get permits. I need to upgrade this. And then it's a cost for that. And, $5,000 to $6,000 on top of the range that they want to swap out, or if they buy an electric vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have anything that fits in that kind of category?
We do have incentives for heat pumps, for heat pump water heater, heat pumps for whole house. Have some incentives for workplace charging. With that workplace charging and multifamily housing charging, we did provide an incentive for the care customers that if there was a need for a panel change out, there would be a bump in those incentives. We don't have that same level of bump in, say, the heat pump or the hot water heat pump, or, switching from a gas hot water heater to an electric hot water heater. That's certainly something staff could look at and see what that looks like. And see what there it is. I would be cautioned. I guess I would have caution of going ahead and doing that proactively with the promise at some point later that somebody would install that hot water heater or heat pump versus trying to actually do that upgrade at the time that somebody's upgrading their air conditioner to a full heat pump, or somebody's upgrading their gas hot water heater to a heat pump hot water heater.
Well, I think the challenge, I know with our water heater, when it goes out, it's cold water. So it's,
Yeah.
Oh no, I've got to go get permits to upgrade everything. But I'm thinking more in the context of, electric cars or whatever. I mean, I tried, smoking a brisket last weekend, and I had to end up with an extension cord from my dryer because I kept. So it's, like clearly I'm using my house as an example. Like, if I wanted to upgrade everything to electricity, my house can't handle it. And so I'm thinking like, okay, there's got to be more people like me that want to transition to cleaner sources. How do we help encourage that process so that when the water heater does go out, my panel's already been upgraded. So my decision isn't immediate, well, okay, I guess I'm going to do this. I'll do tankless this time instead of the regular. And I can go all electric and upgrade. So it was just a question.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it for questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you. I really appreciate, this is such a great opportunity, I think, to echo the mayor's sentiments. What a great problem to get to be trying to solve. And I want to just commend you, Director Crowley, and your staff for bringing forward these ideas and recommendations. I think, yes, with respect to the undergrounding, just looking at cost per mile, it's pretty daunting to think that that's going to be, where we spend this money. But I do, want to just reflect that a lot of residents did comment that that's what they would like. But I do think, knowing really how limited these funds would be in order, if we did just allocate them towards undergrounding, I don't think that's going to be, my number one recommendation here. I did want to ask you, so I think with respect to the undergrounding that we had previously committed to for Healdsburg Avenue, or part of the Healdsburg Avenue improvement project, and for Grove Street, I know parts of the Healdsburg Avenue Improvement Project are within the WUI, some within the high fire severity zone, I think some within the lower, but still in severity on the north end as you get closer towards Saggio Hills or towards Enzo. And I was wondering, since we did already make that determination that we wanted to do undergrounding for that project, but I believe the scope of undergrounding was limited to only a section of the roadway project because of it being cost prohibitive. I'm wondering if we can allocate any of this money towards that existing undergrounding and to try to do more undergrounding for that project, or to at least offset the cost that we've already allocated to free up funds for other purposes.
So certainly that would be an option. The Healdsburg Avenue, you're, as usual, correct, that the Healdsburg Avenue does include a section of the wildfire area. It's about 400 feet. So it's a chunk of the 7 miles that's in that WUI and in the fire threat danger area. So we could get that portion done, and we could, like you said, use some kind of combination of these funds to help offset that cost, or extend that undergrounding project further south, and accomplish a little bit more of the undergrounding closer to, say, Big John's and in that area of that intersection of Dry Creek and Healdsburg Avenue.
Do you recall what is the undergrounding that we've already approved that's within that project scope, and what would not be undergrounded if it stayed as
So the funding that we're looking at right now, and again, it will depend on largely the bids and some uncertainties with PG&E right now, but it goes from basically the North Detention Pond, which is just north of Simi Winery, all the way south to about Terrace or Sunnyvale. That's the range that we're looking at right now as far as the undergrounding. That's the money that we had planned for it. We picked the north end because there were some benefits to the wildfire mitigation, as well as there's some benefits to the community center as well. But that's the limit of it. There's a large section, south of Sunnyvale all the way down to Powell that would be untouched and would have to wait for either development or some other funding source to complete.
Okay. Well, to me, that seems like a low-hanging fruit with respect to the fact that it's already a project that we've discussed as a council and something that we've made a priority for doing undergrounding there. And if it's kind of stretches those dollars further on that same project, I think that could be interesting and certainly. I did want to ask with respect to the question around reducing the cost for our low-income residents and the feedback from Corazon. I really appreciate your comments that we want to apply these funds towards something that's sustainable and not just kind of one-time money, because I don't think that really helps in the long run. I mean, it's a temporary Band-Aid solution, but I think especially with these opportunities, you want them to really try to have a multiplier effect, not just, throwing money at an expensive bill and then that's it. I'm wondering, with some of the projects that are coming up, and I know Director Sotomayor is in the room as well, we have a couple affordable housing projects that are in approved but haven't yet been constructed. And I assume from a cost perspective for doing rooftop solar, it might be easier, cheaper to do rooftop solar during the construction phase of a project as opposed to trying to retrofit after the fact. I'm wondering if it's possible if either of those projects have rooftop solar contemplated in their plans, and if these funds could go towards potentially helping to offset those costs, since I know both of those projects are actively trying to raise the funds to get built right now.
So that would be an option as well. I believe that, both of those development projects, the one at North Village and the one on Dry Creek, are under the new building code that requires solar. So they will have a solar component to them. Limits with multifamily housing, there's not a lot of roof space, right? You have 4-story buildings with a tiny roof, so that we may not build more solar than what's already contemplated, but we could potentially try and offset some of that. Or we could look at, the appliances. Is there a way to put higher efficiency appliances in there, higher efficiency air conditioning that would be a lower cost to operate ongoing? So those are things that we could look as low cost. There is, again, a large existing building stock too that we might want to look at as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that to me is something that's interesting. I think especially with like the Saggio Hills project, just because it's so many different phases and sites that you could have more roof square footage to potentially have that solar in place. And then the other question I had was about battery storage for the either existing floating solar or doing battery storage for our wastewater treatment facility. So I'm a little unclear about, it sounds like we have pretty significant cost to operate the electricity at the wastewater treatment facility. And so are you suggesting that we would just create new solar or that we would implement a battery solution for the existing solar that we have?
So one of the challenges that city has and will continue to face is that we have a lot of rooftop solar, we have a lot of floating solar, but midday loads are very low. And so we have what has been called throughout California the duck curve. And so we have at noon a very, very low amount of load to offset all of the rooftop solar. So if the city goes through and sizably increases the amount of solar that we have installed, so if we went and looked at putting 1 to 2 megawatts of solar in for city facilities, we would probably need to install battery storage to offset that noon production and move that further into the evening. It also would provide some resiliency that, say, if the power went out, we could run off the batteries versus firing up our generators. So there's some kind of a plus there as well. But it wasn't just a battery storage by itself. It was kind of the thought of additional solar and then potentially putting the battery storage in there to manage that peak minimum load.
Great, thank you. I'm definitely interested in that as well, and would like to get more data on feasibility. But thanks.
Member Edwards?
Yeah, this was a little more complicated for me after the city energy presentation that you did a little while ago. It was, before that I was just thinking of the current and what we're now, but with that presentation, it was what we've got coming in the future. And when we're talking software, enterprise software always drives me nuts, because if we're looking at a software solution, are we looking at one that we would get now that might be obsolete, or is there an enterprise software company that has an established record of staying on top of things? Because it seems with what we've got coming in the future, the requirements, as you said, more smart integration of when you charge that software program. Particularly, I like the warning that you're getting close, and that would probably be some kind of preset amount you could set and say, hey, if I get close to this, give me a warning. Is that how that software would work?
So the prepay, typical structure for a prepay account is that you put a deposit in. You say, I'm going to put $100 in, and then as you use that or consume that electricity, it provides warnings. Hey, you've got $25 left on the account, and we estimate that will cover you for the next 7 days. And then it will progressively provide those notifications as you got closer and closer to the bottom, and you could put another payment. Say, I've got $20, I'm going to put $20 in there, and I got another 2 days of power. So that's kind of how a prepay structure works. That software tools, right, they rely on the city's smart meters to bring that information in. And so could that also be used to help integrate and help people manage their loads during peak periods, or provide, both kind of an incentive and a stick to help people look during periods of heavy air conditioning use and grades demand to provide those warnings, or potentially have peak pricing, time of use pricing. So there's other benefits that would come along with that software that would lead more towards that electrification and trying to manage how we electrify our system and how we switch from natural gas to cleaner fuel sources.
And do we have an idea of what that would cost?
So, I mean, the rough numbers and the implementation for software could be between, say, $200,000 to $400,000.
Okay.
Not too much. It's just, I think over time, it's a heavy lift to actually get those programs done. So it could take some time.
Because I know when this was originally, we were talking about this, I was really wanting to get something back to our low income residents. But Councilmember Kelly brought up a very good point of, if we could do a software thing, that would be an ongoing way to save, as opposed to a one-time payment or reduction on the bill on that one. Moving back to the city, you said we use $600,000 worth of power at the wastewater treatment. How many megawatts is that? Do we know?
Um,
Sorry, I'm trying to figure it out because you gave the cost of what it costs per megawatt, and then
Yeah,
I'm trying to.
and that's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship there. So what the peak demand at the wastewater treatment plant's about 700 kilowatts. But I think the energy usage per month is about 33,000 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
So that the plant runs 24/7. You know, it does have a daytime peak when the operation processes are at peaking, but because it runs 24/7 and your solar only produces energy 6 days a week, you have to build a much larger solar installation to actually offset your annual energy usage. So we may not be able to offset all of the energy usage from the wastewater treatment plant based on the land that's available to us, but we could get a large chunk of it. And again, reduce those operating costs ongoing, which would lessen future rate impacts.
And that would be something like parking lot solar.
Well, we have some open space. There's some nooks and crannies open space in the presentation. The satellite image was of the Magnolia Lift Station. It's a very small facility on a large piece of land off of Magnolia Drive. And so there's more space out there that we could develop more solar and potentially try and find a way to credit that back to the wastewater treatment plant's energy needs. So there's just some structures in there that we would look at to see what we could do to lessen that bill through on-site solar.
And then when we're talking battery, I haven't looked at it since we sold our property, but it seemed that the curve was going that the panels were getting cheaper and the batteries were getting more expensive currently. And I would think for the backup batteries for the city, that would be a huge facility, wouldn't it? Or is it?
Again, depends on the size, but it's usually like a cargo C-van type of cargo container that they build them inside of them, and you have 3 or 4 of those sitting out there. So it's not tremendous compared to the size that we would match compared to the solar. So it wouldn't take up a lot of land.
So we're looking backup for our wastewater treatment, not backup battery for the city.
So we could install it on the land that we own, right? So could we put battery backup at Magnolia Lift Station where there's more land, tie that into our distribution system and form a small utility microgrid? We could do that. That would be an option once you had the solar and battery installed in sufficient quantities. But there's other things that we would have to do there. So you could do that, but it also would provide that resiliency to those facilities so that they're not 100% relying on their diesel generators should the power go out.
And I wanted to give you some credit as far as resilience, because when I moved to Healdsburg, when the wind blew hard, the power went out. And it has been extremely reliable. In fact, I kind of think that because I brought down a generator, that has never had to use it in the 4 years since I brought it down from our old place. So we have come a long ways in reliability, and I wanted to give you credit and your team for that. So thank you.
Thanks.
I just had a couple questions. So we talked a lot about the different, for utility bills, low income utility bills and care programs and so on that are already existing. So what would we be talking about using this money for related to that?
So in staff's concept, again, subject to council's direction, is we would look at potentially providing assistance with the applications to get the state grant funding. Maybe there's a small matching fund that the city could contribute using these sale proceeds. And then maybe there's a way that the city could supplement and provide some project management to move those projects forward. I think that's what we're noticing with the multifamily apartments right now and trying to do the direct install of the appliances, is they just do not have the capacity. The property managers on site, the property managers that are offsite do not have the capacity to actually move those projects forward. And so I think the city could provide that administrative support to try and move things forward and get it done. Obviously that's subject to willing property managers, but I think that's what staff was kind of looking at. Not necessarily paying for the whole project outright, just really trying to look at the state multifamily housing is participating in that.
So you're suggesting perhaps some money set aside to do that for a period of time, obviously not in perpetuity?
Yeah, there may be some, additional grant writers to file the applications. There may be additional funds to hire project managers to move the project forward. Maybe there's some additional funds that are used to supplement designs and get those things moving forward, but then really relying on those state funding mechanisms to move that project to completion.
Okay, great, thank you. And then also the undergrounding, so you said it'd be about $2 million per mile to underground?
Between $2 to $5 million is the estimate. Yes, it's expensive.
So we could eat up our, 3 million goes fast, it's amazing. If you do that, what opportunities, or are there opportunities for grant funding, federal funding? At this point, who knows, but for that kind of project?
So there are some grants out there. They don't seem to be as available as renewable energy grants, but there are some grants out there for modernization or wildfire mitigation. Undergrounding fits into those categories, but they're pretty competitive because there's a lot.
Mhm, mhm. So, and then lastly, the solar battery idea out at the wastewater treatment plant seems like, for me, it seems like a good opportunity to be able to capitalize on the funds and have it look forward and continue to grow, and save money, which could free up money for other things too, right? So am I missing anything in that, or is that kind of the proposal?
That's the proposal there, is that, you're trying to get as many of those outcomes as possible with the project so that your money goes the farthest. And so there's tax incentives through the direct pay program. There's grant funding for modernization of water and wastewater facilities. There's, a lot of things that, potentially the city would be able to reach out to develop that renewable energy at those facilities. And so that's an option. And again, ultimately that would help to lower the operating costs for the wastewater department.
Great. So if it's okay with you guys, I'll open this up to public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this topic? No. Okay, so we'll bring it back to council for any more questions or comments that you want to make? No? So I think we need to sort of clarify what each one of us is suggesting that we would like to propose here. City manager, can you help us with this?
Yeah, I will try. I think you've heard a really good analysis, and we've already heard some feedback from all of you, which is helpful here. In terms of those bigger ticket items in particular, undergrounding, solar with battery storage, I think it would be really good to hear, hopefully, a consensus from the council in terms of preference. We're not asking you to commit to something tonight, but rather based on that, Terry and his team can take that feedback and try to put together a proposal.
Take them one at a time. So I think there's really two major projects here, the undergrounding and the battery storage out at the wastewater treatment plant. Do we have consensus on kind of those two things, 1 and 2, or?
Well, I would say battery storage and the undergrounding, but not necessarily at the water treatment plant, because I think we can do it at the Badger substation. That then I want to leave the flexibility, but I'm in favor of battery storage. I like the undergrounding focused on, extending the Healdsburg Avenue instead of, up in the woods, unless that having that available helps us get additional funding. And then I'm still intrigued on the software. I'd like to get a little bit more detail on the software upgrades, and because I know having this clunky software as people are transitioning to app-based, your refrigerator can be on an app, right, to tell you when you're out of milk or something, I think now.
Not mine, but yeah.
And to have our clunky system that even just on water rates where we can't figure out if somebody's got their home garden and so their water usage is high. But if there's a way that, we can fine tune the tiers and, help people get a heads up if they're, using too much energy, that their price is going to go, like, I like that. Sorry, I kind of.
No, that's good.
took over.
Councilmember Kelly, what do you think?
I concur. I think the battery storage, I'm very interested in kind of learning more and getting, more information. I think putting some pressure on that duck curve and trying to help us extend that solar to parts of the day when we need to be leveraging it makes sense. And location wise, I kind of defer to staff on where you guys think it's going to make the most sense. I think with respect to the undergrounding, as I mentioned, the Healdsburg Avenue and trying to, I think when we talked about undergrounding that project, I had a very different vision of how much undergrounding we'd actually be able to do than obviously how expensive it is. And so you guys have really tried to do as much as you can to extend those dollars to get it undergrounded. But Sunnyvale North is really just a tiny portion of that project. And since it is going to be such a transformational project, I think it'd be wonderful if we could try to get more undergrounding, south of Sunnyvale as you get closer to Big John's, et cetera. But again, that's just, one area. I think with respect to the technology and the app or, user interface for customers, my only concern is that I think the folks that I think about most that I've heard a lot from in kind of one-on-one conversations are low-income customers, our care customers, and people on a fixed income. I don't know if a consumer-focused or a consumer-facing technology solution is going to be the best solution for our immigrant community and our seniors, because typically we do see a lot of those people paying bills in person, getting paper bills, not leveraging the existing online tools that exist, not that they're very robust now. So I'm not certain, I think that would meet the need that people are expressing, that the people that we're trying to solve these challenges for. So while I think, personally, and as we move forward into, modernizing our systems, having better consumer-facing tools makes a ton of sense. But I think in the short term for our low-income residents, I'm not exactly sure that a technology solution is gonna. It might be a little square peg round hole. So that's my only concern with that. But I do like the idea. I just don't know if it exactly hits that demographic we're trying to serve. Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, as one who's not a fan of generally putting technology on seniors and having to do that, I do see that as the only long-term way to reduce cost for those customers. I know we have a kiosk at the bill pay, which I think would be a good way that if they're coming in to pay your bill, you could use that kiosk and the software would possibly be available on that, because I really want to come away with something that's going to be a long-term way to reduce costs for our lower income customers. And the resiliency, the solar backup is one that I think can help us from having to come forward and, okay, now we're required to do this at some point in the future, and having to do another strong rate increase. So if we can do that battery backup, and I think really I feel strongly about, we've got to have a component that's going to reduce cost for our seniors and our lower income customers. So that's how I feel on this.
Thank you. So I would say that the battery backup solar would be the first choice for me, because I do think it would reduce costs ultimately, because it would save money and create opportunities for a lot of other programs and looking. So to me, that makes sense. As far as the software, yeah, I like the idea, but I think Councilmember Kelly makes a really good point about it. And I don't know if people would use it. Would it really save money? Would they, I don't know. My husband won't use an app on his phone, and he's young and smart. So I don't know about others. But the undergrounding, I like the idea because it's more of the beauty of it and the transformational piece of it that you're talking about, Councilmember Kelly, with doing it with that project. But I'm not really sure it gains us anything beyond that. It's not saving, it's not the wild, it's not undergrounding the utility poles in the WUI beyond that, because Sunnyvale to Powell isn't a fire zone, right? Is it a concern?
South of Sunnyvale, south of Terrace is not, along Healdsburg Avenue.
Yeah. So I mean, I would go with the undergrounding if we're helping with the fire mitigation piece, but it's a lot of money to spend on otherwise. But I wouldn't object to trying it, to looking at it, but I think it might not gain us the most. That's my opinion.
Can I make one more comment? One thing is, I mean, it sounds like we've kind of settled on the two battery storage and the undergrounding. And I think to your point, I think because we have those, the opportunity to be able to explore leveraging that, like I said, you know, we submitted something for battery storage, and that is crucial during PSPSs where we can take the solar during the day and then we can electrify critical infrastructure during a PSPS if our, you know, if the transmission is cut by PG&E into Healdsburg, the battery storage can then like keep a grocery store open or, you know, different critical infrastructure, hospitals. So I think that's something that then we can leverage, you know, as we're looking for additional grant funding. Same with the undergrounding. If we've got, okay, it's not going to go all the way to Powell, but we can get to Big John's. But hey, we've already got this much. Maybe there's some additional. So I would kind of, my personal direction would be, yeah, these two things. But as we're exploring it, what opportunities are there to leverage up within those two categories, whether it's battery or the undergrounding, to try to, you know, get more? Because I think having these funds for potential battery stores at $6 million, but hey, we've already got 3. I think that helps our case in trying to get additional funding. Just a thought.
I agree. Do you have enough direction then?
Yes,
Okay.
feel good.
Thank you. Thank you for that report, and we look forward to spending the money.
Thank you.
All right. So next up, fiscal year 2024-25 mid-year city council goal update. City Manager Jeff Kay.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. This is our annual check-in, mid-year check-in, middle of the fiscal year, that is, on the city council goals for the current year. So I should have recounted. I don't remember exactly. I think 37. I don't know if anybody remembers the number. I think we have 37 goals for this year. So it is not my intent to give you a long discourse on each and every one of those. But I do think it's a good time for us to just check in and see how we're doing. So I'm planning to zip through the list of goals. And we've got all of our, either in the room or on Zoom, we've got all of our department directors, mostly in the room, who will be here. So I will deflect. Certainly, it's okay if you have questions about any of those particular goals. If that triggers something you'd like more information on, I'll hand off to the experts. But what I'll try to do at this point is just give you a quick walkthrough of how we're doing on those goals. Just really quickly before we do that, just a reminder for folks who are here, folks who are watching at home. In my mind, city council goals are discrete projects, maybe not one-year projects. You'll see we have some of these that are moving along, but not necessarily completed in one fiscal year, but projects that end. And I draw that distinction to the day-to-day work that we all do, and I think it's really, really important, and honestly is the bulk of the time spent collectively by our staff. But I don't think it makes good sense to include that on your goals. So maintaining excellent parks and open spaces, it's important. I think we do that. Wouldn't be a goal. The service we provide, we just talked about people coming into the utility billing center. Again, super important, not a goal. So these are really discrete projects that we can track and sooner or later, hopefully mostly in this fiscal year, check off. So just a little bit of context about what this list is. It's not the totality of everything we're working on, but these are items that were highlighted by the city council in your goal setting last spring, and meant to really cover essentially the fiscal year that we're in right now from July through June. Next slide, please. These will be categorized by the city council's 7 strategic initiatives. So as they were when they were adopted, they'll be in those buckets. And the first is economic diversity. And the first up here is housing element implementation. We do have a goal to, you'll of course recall that last year we completed, early last year, completed and had the state certify the city's housing element. That document is an important milestone to check off, but more importantly, it makes commitments, and more the state really makes you adhere to those commitments with regular reports for the city to do a lot of things in terms of housing. Thus far, we've been focused, I'd say, on some of the more policy analysis work related to that, the downtown capacity study, the housing needs assessment, both of which have been completed. But there are a handful of things that would put in the ongoing category here. Objective design standards might be a phrase you're hearing a lot more as the state comes down with more by right elimination of local land use control. One of the tools cities can apply is objective design standards, where even if you can't necessarily say no to a project on density or parking basis, you can at least apply some design standards. And that's one of those things that we intend to develop, but are just beginning to work on. You can see parking requirements was called out in the housing element, updating our density bonus ordinance. You'll hear from time to time that projects get density over and above the zoning code. How do they do that? Well, there's state law that allows it and mandates it, and we need to get updated and be in compliance with that, and likewise with accessory dwelling unit laws at the state level. So a lot of these things are getting up to speed with the constant pace of changes in state law, but there are a handful that we're beginning to work on, and we intend to bring some more back this year. But quite a bit of work to go. So this is one where we've definitely got some additional work to do. Next up, under this strategic initiative, you can see at the bottom of the slide there, amending the scope of services with the Chamber of Commerce. The council wanted to have a distinct session to talk about that last year, and just remind you that happened last spring and was incorporated, that direction was incorporated into the Chamber of Commerce contract for the fiscal year. So that counts as complete, but of course I'll note that fiscal year will be winding down soon enough, and it will be time to talk about the next contract. So that will be coming this spring. Next slide, please. Strategic initiative number 2 is environmental stewardship. So we have a handful of goals under this one is postal fleet electrification white paper. This is something that the city council requested. The goal here was to really outline why Healdsburg would be a good candidate for either early implementation or a pilot project of electrification of the post office fleet, which is something they've been talking about for a long time, largely owing to some of the things we just talked about, our electric system and the fact that we have very, very competitive rates at roughly half of what neighboring communities have with PG&E. So that analysis was prepared. We provided a link to it in your staff report packet. And has been shared with our federal delegation. It's no surprise to anybody, we don't control the post office. We can't compel their vehicle decisions, but what we did is try to get that information to the right people and make known our willingness to partner. Next slide, please. Affordable housing, we've got a few. One is continue the work of our housing element work group. You'll recall that group was formed to provide community, resident, guidance in the development of our housing element, and then the city council blessed a scope of work beyond the housing element, which had a few tasks. They are on the last of those additional tasks at this time, working on the discussion of a housing trust fund. So that, as you probably have seen, is something that you'll be seeing at an upcoming city council meeting. It's something that our staff has also, our housing department has been analyzing, looking at other models, talking to regional partners. So just on a preliminary basis, we'll have an initial conversation with the city council about that in the next month. I don't remember the date, but I know it's one of the next 2 or 3 meetings, just to really introduce the concept, provide some different governance and management options, and get some thoughts from the council on how we proceed. So that would be the final thing on the scope of work for the housing element work group. And then the next one here is, and we just talked about this a little bit, the Saggio Hills Affordable Housing Project. This one is really close in phase 1 to being funded. We're hoping for, and I'll say the exact same thing with the Dry Creek project in just a second, but we're hoping for some good funding news really in the next couple of weeks, or handful of weeks at least, where in this project, phase 1 would be funded, ready to roll. This project, and I'll also say this about the Dry Creek project, is in for permitting with the city already. So it's our very strong expectation that we'll be breaking ground and under construction in the next handful of months, and certainly this year. Next slide. So here's Dry Creek. I won't say it all again, but it's really close. It's had, both of these projects have been very successful, even though it's been a little scary that they're both going for funding at the same time. And they're not competing, but for funding, sometimes they are, but we've had good news for both of them. This one doesn't have phases in the same way, so our expectation is with a little bit of good news in the next few weeks, this project is fully funded and off and running this year. So I know it's been coming for a long time. Next up is a policy project. This is consideration of strengthening and expanding our local preference policy. You all know we have a policy that dictates that marketing efforts be focused initially on Healdsburg residents and Healdsburg employees or former residents and employees for affordable housing projects. That was really successful in terms of getting, I think, over 80% of the residents of the Randall were locals. But the goal here is to look at how we what it would mean to strengthen that policy, what it could accomplish in terms of getting more locals into affordable housing projects, and a lot of I know you're familiar with this, the legal constraints and fair housing law that tie into that. So that analysis is ongoing. We have some initial drafts internally. So it's my hope, certainly this fiscal year, we will be on target to get that in front of the City Council and give you that analysis. Next slide. Still on affordable housing, a couple that are complete. There was a goal to review city-owned housing that could have, city-owned land for housing production. And we obviously had that conversation just a couple of meetings ago. And second, consider possible amendments to the growth management ordinance. That obviously is complete, and Measure O was on the ballot and defeated in November. On this one, I'll just say that just a short summary, but since the focus of this presentation tonight is a check-in on the work that we're all collectively doing. And there's just a handful of words on that one. I just do recall that right around this time a year ago, we were spending many hours in these here chambers having conversations about housing policy. Our housing element work group spent many hours on this. We had many, many members of the community who were coming in and providing feedback and participating in those discussions. So while the measure was defeated, I actually will say that I feel good and proud of the work that we collectively did with everybody leaning into a challenging issue, really all with the same intention, which was what can we do to increase housing affordability. So even with the outcome, I think there was good work and good thought and very good intention that went into that. Obviously, we respect what happened in November. So the challenge for us all in the coming months and coming years will be to look at what policy options we have within those constraints to keep working on this challenge. But it says complete, and I did just want to note that I've been reflecting back on a year ago, and there was an awful lot of time spent here in these city council meetings working on that. So I think there was a lot of good work in there, and I trust that we'll be able to channel that going forward. Next slide, please. Okay, infrastructure and facilities. Next slide. Library upgrades was a city council goal. We just got a very favorable check-in report from Sonoma County Library. You'll recall that they're obviously working on the renovation of the facility, which we own. The city has funds in that and has played a role in permitting. It's going very well. I don't have a date at this time, but they're calling it the midpoint and feeling like things are proceeding. So we're definitely on the road to having a newly renovated library. And as we know, we have a mini library, temporary library up at the community center, which is doing great as well. As by middle of the week, fairly late last week, and there were a whole bunch of people in there using that library. So it's getting used. New fire substation, of course, we all celebrated the hose uncoupling a few months ago. Full disclosure, as I think you all know, we do have some work to get some technology and FF&E, the furnishing and fixtures in there. So we're taking a little liberty to call that complete, but there's a little work to do. And then park financing plan, this is something we checked off, I think almost a year ago at this point. You'll recall the question before us in developing that financing plan was, we don't have enough money to build the entirety of our vision for Saggio Hills, now Summersall, Laura Fish Summersall Park, and Badger Park. So what components do we prioritize? So that was a challenging conversation, but an important one. And we went out to bid, and we are under construction and actively involved now in the design for Summersall Park. So we'll talk about Badger in a minute and some of the work going on there, but that was an important project that really led to getting that design underway. Next slide, please. I'll move quickly through a couple of big projects here. Healdsburg Avenue, complete streets, design continues to roll forward. We've talked a lot about that, more to come. Grove Street, we're really in, I think, the home stretch on design work, so hopefully we'll talk about wrapping that up shortly as well. Ward Street neighborhood plan, we're close. We're not as far along on this one, but we are making progress. We're hoping to put out an RFP for design and surveying work. You can see here early this spring. The design is probably self-explanatory. The survey is pretty important because we need to figure out where utilities are, where lines are, but also there's some issues with drainage out there. It's something we're mindful of this time of year, and that's part of what we'll look at with that project. And then enhanced maintenance for our LIDs. Those are low impact development areas. I do not recall how this one came on our list, but I remember the discussion. I don't remember what the genesis was. But in evaluating it, what became clear is we had a lot of these bulb outs, landscaped areas. You can see a photo there that had frankly seen better days throughout our downtown. And spurred by this was a pretty involved program by our public works staff to inventory them all, get a schedule for maintaining them and get that on the books, but also to do some pretty meaningful overhauls of some of these areas. You can see an example there in terms of leveling out the gravel, making sure that these first and foremost are for drainage, and make sure they're working appropriately, and update the landscaping. So I hope people have noticed that, but we actually have quite a few of them that have been significantly improved, and we have a plan in place that will allow, I think, for better maintenance going forward. So relatively modest item, but actually a really nice win and something that I think we're better for. Next slide, please. Recycled water. Again, we've talked about this one a lot, but big project. We are weeks away, small number of weeks away from celebrating the completion of that one. So we're going to wait for things to dry out just a little bit, but
It won't be a ribbon cutting, but what kind of creative uncoupling of the recycled water might we see happen?
We have kicked around a couple. The window is still open for creative ideas. We have had some internal discussions. We're trying to do something fun for sure, but send them over if you all have ideas. And aquifer storage and recovery is another one we've talked about a fair amount. We've done preliminary feasibility work on that and are working through it with our grantors, getting to the point of being close to drilling exploratory wells, which would be a key step in really determining what's down there, and setting ourselves up for a construction plan for a long-term implementation of this. So a lot of steps, a lot of process, but this is really getting closer to, it's becoming much more real. Though I will note there's federal money in lots of these projects, but this one is a direct FEMA grant. I have no wisdom as to what that looks like going forward, except to say that we're keeping an eye on it. Next slide, please. Few more water projects, the Fitch and Dry Creek well fields we've completed. We had work to do. Part of this is updates to infrastructure. You can see PFAS, these are the forever chemical filtration, is something that we need to do for regulatory reasons. But Dry Creek is also a piece of our being able to take more water from Lake Sonoma, which is part of our long-term water resiliency. So we've moved through, you can see here, design and are under review with the state. So again, these are long-term projects, but absolutely making progress. And then shifting, really different category, visioning for our community center. This came about, or the progress on this has been a little bit different than I might have imagined when we did goal setting about a year ago. But right around that time, the Healthcare Foundation got a grant for a visioning process for a multicultural wellness center. And they've been partnering with Corazon and having a number of listening sessions. And what I didn't see coming, but maybe should have, is that throughout those listening sessions, what they heard over and over again is the community center for a lot of people kind of is that place. So then their conversation shifted a little bit to what sorts of improvements, projects could be done at the community center, which enhance their goal of a multicultural wellness center, fit within the confines of what the community center is and what that needs to be and continues to be. And so the city was pulled into some of those conversations. I know the council's been at some of the listening sessions. I've been involved with Director Themig and more of the conversations as their design team comes back with ideas. So I'm actually really excited that there'll be some things on that list that fulfill their vision, but also give us some really neat ideas for things that we could do at the community center just to give it some improvement. So we are scheduling right now presentations to the Parks and Rec Commission and then the City Council this spring to give you all a chance within the confines of one of your meetings to just hear all of that and provide feedback. And there could be some funds out there as a result of this partnership for implementation. So that'll be coming to you soon. It's a little bit different, I think, than what we envisioned about the long-term future of the community center, but I think it's a pretty good place to start since there's already energy there. And again, I've seen some ideas for improvements that I think are pretty neat and things that we might be able to do quickly. And the pool was mentioned in that, and the landscape for the pool has changed a little bit too. I think when it was put on the goals, really the question that's been floated from time to time is, if we need if nothing else, a renovated pool, if not a reconstructed pool, is it in the right location? I know it's been discussed at times that the community center could be part of its future. I don't have an answer to that right now, but what we do know is that the pool was included in a bond issuance that was put on the ballot by the school district back in November, and that passed. So there is now money for reconstructing the pool. It is not number one, and I get this, on their priority list of improvements that were in that bond issuance, so it's not something that's coming at us right away. But they've obviously committed, and we appreciate to conversations with the city and what I'm sure would end up being conversations with the community about what should be the long-term future of that pool. So I don't think the time is quite right for us to make that decision, but we've certainly been engaged with them, and we have something exciting to look forward to in terms of funding for that project. So not exactly what we, I think, envisioned this time last year, but definitely making progress on planning for the pool. Next slide, please. This is our effective governance initiative. A couple quick ones. We had a goal to make sure we televise city council meetings, not just on Facebook, but on YouTube. Check. We are live on YouTube right now, I think. So that is available. People can watch us on YouTube. YouTube is a place where people can search for text in easier ways than some other channels, but we're also on Facebook. We're also on Zoom. So just trying to be out there and accessible for as many people as possible. Next goal is to streamline the process by which people can get online. It was a little bit buried in our website. That is ongoing, and the reason for that, you'll recall, is that the council has approved and the city has begun implementing new agenda management software. The software we're using is at the end of its useful life and not supported in ways that are becoming a challenge. So we believe there will be some options for that as we get it implemented. It's probably a couple of months until we get to that point. I think you can imagine that internally, in terms of staff operations, there's a lot of training and setting up new rules and protocols, but contract is signed and we are in the early part of that implementation process. So you can look for more later this spring. Next slide. So this is public safety. The first two are related to fire services. One was to continue implementation of our community wildfire protection plan. There's a lot in that, but one thing that we think is noteworthy so far this year that we wanted to highlight that really tied into that plan was to pursue remediation of the arundo, which is an invasive species around the river, which is a high fire risk. And in partnership with Russian Riverkeeper, a grant was secured and a whole lot of work has been done. You can see just off the bridge, but all the way around Fitch Mountain in terms of remediation for arundo. So that's one great success. And then second, fuels reduction. That is part of fuels reduction, of course, but there's been a lot going on at Fitch Mountain open space, the Ridge open space, and up at the Gauntlet Reservoir in terms of treatment. You can see we've had the sheeps and goats back that you've seen, and prescription burns. We finally, after assembling a whole lot of piles in a whole lot of places, finally had favorable weather over the last month or so. So we've been able to address a lot of those burns. So I hope people have seen that, but I know there's been a very high volume of materials that have been remediated. Next slide. On the police side, public health is implementation of a gun safety education program. We had put forth a gun safety proclamation, and there was a desire, a very good one, to make sure we were doing real education and some outreach around that. So the police department put together brochures. We've made gun locks available at the police department and given away a lot of them. I don't remember the number, but the chief might. That's over 750, so more than I remembered. So a successful program for sure. And just trying to get information out. Our police department's active at a lot of community events, so they're bringing materials related to this program to those events and trying to communicate the program to people. So always more we can do, and we'll keep looking for that, but we are doing quite a bit more than we were a year ago. Next slide, please. Community services, implementation of the Arts and Culture Master Plan. There have been a few moving parts on this. The Arts Commission is a separate goal we'll get to shortly. But obviously that commission formation was a big deal. The other thing I'll highlight is we hired a part-time arts and culture program administrator. That's Taryn Moeller, who's off to a great start and will be working directly with the commission in addition to doing a lot of work. So we've got more capacity, and I think you'll be seeing a lot more pretty soon on that. And then we've done some preliminary work on updating a joint use agreement with the school district. That conversation shifts a little bit as we begin talking about what the future of the pool is, but that's ongoing at this point and something that we will continue to work on. Next slide. Foley Family Community Pavilion on target. I would have told you we had about a month ago, a little over a month, we had a lot of rain and it probably set us behind schedule a little bit. We had a long stretch of dry weather and I think that caught us up. And now it's pouring again, so we'll see what that does. But in general, the project is on schedule and doing pretty well. So we're targeting midsummer, and we will, I think we might do a traditional ribbon on that one, but we will open that facility. And then next, Villa Chanticleer capital replacement plan. We've made a number of improvements there. Some old structures have disappeared, you may have noticed. Paint on some of the outbuildings that are there. Couple of significant, sometimes because we had no choice when things fell down, but tree improvements and tree clearage. So we've made a number of improvements there, still working with our tenant Milestone, which operates the facility, in terms of development of a longer term plan for capital. So that will be forthcoming. Next slide, please. Saggio Hills Park development, now Laura Fish Summersall Park. As I mentioned before, design is underway. Our plan is to have that out to bid for phase one of that park late this year with the ability to get cracking early next year as soon as the rains let up. A little bit further back on Badger, but we're working on a mitigated neg deck, which is part of the CEQA process, and hoping to have that before all of you to get the environmental clearance out of the way by this spring. Next slide, please. Here is, I mentioned Laura Fish Summersall Park. That naming process was ambitious and comprehensive, and I think really, really good. Lots of community input, and really a neat process overall that came to a great resolution. So complete. We will absolutely look for an appropriate time to do. We don't have a park up there at this time, but as we start to make progress on the design, I think there will be still an opportunity to get out there and celebrate with people who are excited about that naming. And the second item here, Hilltop Road erosion repairs. That's a fire safety road up on Fitch Mountain and had obviously erosion and some of the rains that were bringing that down. So we had 2 phases of work planned out, and happy to share with you that both of those are complete. So there will always be maintenance up there, but the road's in good shape for now. Next slide, please. I mentioned before, we said to consider an Arts and Culture Commission was your goal, and we did one better, and we have formed the commission. They had their first meeting last month and are off and underway. And then consider an alternative 4th of July fireworks. That conversation obviously happened with the city council a few months ago. So the direction was to continue with the show and the morning events that we have in the community, but we didn't have that evaluation and discussion. And then lastly here, I think this is the first time we've said not yet started, but not yet started. Selection of a city flower or plant in coordination with the garden clubs. We recognize that that is one that we will, I think we can pull it off. But that's one that we'll have to get started and get some work done for you. I think that is it. So there is a lot there. I apologize for going very fast through 37. Very happy to take your questions, and I'll pass them off to the experts.
Thank you. That was a great update. Do we have questions? Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, for police chief, the trigger locks are great doing that. Have we made any progress on maybe getting something in the senior center newsletter for gun turn-ins for Gun Safety Week in August? Have we worked on making it easy for the community to turn in guns maybe during that Gun Safety Week?
As far as making it easy, I think it's pretty straightforward. We do have some information that we can pass along to the senior center on how to get that done.
Okay, great. Thank you. Because I've heard that people are mentioned if a spouse passes away, they want to get rid of a firearm that may be in the house. So thank you.
No problem.
Councilmember Kelly.
I had a question for Director Themig about the pool. So I think it's wonderful that this opportunity has presented itself, because I know obviously for a very long time we were struggling in partnership with the school district to figure out where we could find the funds to potentially build a new pool or renovate the existing. And it's been, quite the hot potato. So great that the bond passed and that the pool is included in that. My question for you is, I've heard from a lot of folks in the community about wanting to bring back competitive swimming, and that competitive swimming for youth, having a Neptunes program here is a priority for some families. And so I'm curious, is there an opportunity, which doesn't necessarily always equate to HUSD's, focus on education and academics, maybe not necessarily being totally in touch with the people who are interested in creating a more robust recreation facility for competitive swimming, and or potentially diving if we were to ever put, a diving pool in. And so I'm curious, what does an opportunity look like now that this door has opened for the, design or building of a new pool, where we could have community participation, we could have a city conversation with them that involves residents or involves the Parks and Rec Commission. I just would hate to miss an opportunity to really ensure that what gets built is really in line with what the community's hopes and dreams are. And I don't see a reason why we couldn't have a great world-class facility, given who we are as a community and the nature of athletics. I don't know if you recall the Olympic swimmers that came earlier in this year to be recognized. And so we do have a history of a lot of really great swimmers in this community. I just think having a pool that everyone can use that we're proud of would be really important.
So just ask for clarification. Are you asking about the swim team program or the design process?
I'm asking about how do we ensure that the pool that gets built is in line with what our community wants, and who makes that decision, and how do we ensure that there's stakeholders at the table that care about competitive swimming and can help guide that process forward?
Sure. So there haven't been any really detailed conversations about the design process. I've asked the superintendent of the school district a couple times in terms of what their timeline is. He thinks that they may start that design process in a year or so. It'll take about a year and a half, maybe 2 years for that to go through the state architect and all that approval. From my perspective, I made it clear, if the city's going to have a role in this, we need to be at the table representing the community in the design. And his response was absolutely. So I think it's a bit too early to project on what that process will be. My understanding is they're going to focus on some of their other elementary school work, and then this will come after they get that design underway. They'll kick off the pool process at that point. So I think there's a commitment from the district to ensure that the city's part of the design at the table and representing the community. And I think there'll be an opportunity for the community to be part of that process too. You're welcome.
I just have one other question, but for Director Sotomayor, if that's okay. So with I feel badly in that the housing element item that's on the goal setting, I feel like we should have a complete next to it because we did get a certified housing element done. And so congrats. And I know that was not an easy lift, but there's so many little sub items underneath that will be, continuing forward. So I think good note for maybe ourselves in the future, give ourselves more check boxes to say mission accomplished. But I did want to ask about the parking requirements component that's in that item. Because we've been getting, emails from folks in the community. It certainly came up when we were talking about housing development and parking requirements downtown. I know it's one of the priority issues that Generation Housing has been talking about, and other cities within Sonoma County have been looking at their downtown parking requirements as well. So I'm curious, is that something that you guys have taken up a conversation around? Is that something that may be better suited to be a conversation that the Planning Commission takes up? And I'm just curious, is that something that we could advance? Because I know we keep getting, it bubbles up and then it goes away and then it bubbles up again. But since it's on our goals and something that we did talk about previously, where do you see that taking shape?
So it's definitely part of the housing element goals, and there's quite a few beyond the existing goals that were listed there. In fact, there's a general plan across the 8 years, and then there's our pro-housing goals on top of it. So it is comprehensive as part of the package of housing goals. But specific to the parking, I would have to get back to you on that. I haven't engaged in that conversation with planning yet on the approach to it, but I definitely can report back on how we intend to do that.
Great. And I think I just asked the city manager if that is an item that we anticipate having discussion around, or something that is, since it is named in the goals, is that something that we anticipate happening in the next 6 months before the end of the fiscal? Maybe not adopting something, but certainly having a dialogue.
Honestly, I'd say not with certainty at this time. I think that's part of a package of things that we've been evaluating and trying to figure out what the strategy is for moving forward. There's a lot of moving parts on that one. I don't know if we have Director Diven also might have some insight on that. I think there's different layers. And, I don't know that we've been intending candidly to have kind of a comprehensive discussion of parking requirements in the very short term, but we recognize that it's part of a larger planning discussion and have been thinking more about folding it in as we take on additional planning efforts. But those could take longer. So if there's a desire to see that piece accelerated, it's something we could talk about, but I don't think we have a fully baked plan at this moment. Okay. And I know Scott's in there somewhere. Scott, are we missing anything or anything to add on that?
City Manager Kay, I think you summed it up pretty well.
Scott, if you can hold on 1 second, we're going to turn you up. Okay.
I said, City Manager Kay, I think you summed it up pretty well. There's a lot of changes also that's happening at the state level that's kind of forcing some parking changes down upon the city, and how we have to look at parking requirements in relationship to the future smart rail station, in particular within a half-mile radius. And so bringing some of our planning documents up to speed to reflect that, I think would be helpful, and would certainly allow developers to have a better sense of what their responsibilities are. But the real focus of that policy and the housing element is a recognition that parking is expensive, and it has a huge impact on the cost of producing housing, whether it's market rate or affordable housing. And so it's something that we could look at to see if are we over parking some projects? Is there room to make some changes? So, but figuring out the best planning process to take that up is kind of what we're considering at this point in time.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I would just ask for greater clarity from staff, and it doesn't have to be in this moment, but I do think that that is something that we've heard from multiple people who are attempting to build housing in our community, that the parking requirements are an impediment. And so since it is something that we discussed in our goal setting last year and it's on our goals, it would be great if that can be something that's discussed and addressed at the staff level, if that's, the will of our council. But I believe that it was something that was discussed and put on our goals. So I'd like to see it at least brought forward, even if there's no resolution that comes out of it, but a conversation.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Open it up to public comment to the empty room. Well, not empty, but you know, the ones that have to be here are still here. So I'll bring it back. Thank you for that. Do we have any further comments or questions?
Pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah, well, I don't know about us, but certainly these guys. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Jeff. And so we'll move on now. New business, appointments to Parks and Rec and Senior Citizen Advisory Committees or commissions. So should we start with Parks and Recs? It comes up first on here, Councilmember Kelly.
So we had 5 applicants. Oh, sorry, Raina, did you? Okay. We had 5 applicants to the Parks and Recreation Commission. Really wonderful group of applicants, and I'm always just blown away by the amount of talent and energy that exists in this community. And when people want to step up and volunteer in this way, it is always just wonderful to see. And I say this every time, but I will say it again. For anyone who is not selected tonight, but interested in serving, I would just strongly urge you to stay in touch and please reapply and continue to participate, attend the meetings, weigh in, be an active member of the public, and that'll make it that much easier to appoint folks in the future if they're up to speed and engaged. So we have a number of vacancies of terms that have ended. I believe we have, sorry, let me just pull up which one it is. So there's 4 seats that are open, 3 3-year terms, I believe. Here's the information. So 1 2-year term and 3 3-year terms. So of the folks that applied, we did have 3 commissioners who are currently serving on the commission, some of whom are only currently serving on a partial term. So Vice Mayor Herod and I had the opportunity to interview all 5 candidates and really weighed the skill set of both the applicants and then the commissioners that currently sit on the commission who are not up, and really trying to balance everyone's skills, professional expertise, lived experience, et cetera, in trying to come up with a council that's, or a commission, that's reflective of the community and that has, carries a lot of different subject matter expertise. Because as we know, community services is much more than just parks and playgrounds. And so with that, the 3 commissioners that we are recommending for the 3-year seats are the 3 incumbents, Kristen Thwaites, Richard Halverson, and Nancy Jane Andrews. And then the commissioner that we are suggesting or recommending appointment to the 2-year seat would be Yolanda Wang.
Councilmember Higley. Oh, okay. So you're by motion, the 3 and the 1, right? And then
so moved.
Seconded. And so sorry. Thank you. Public comment? It's hard to remember to do that, but I'll bring it back. Thank you. And so could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, and thank you for that. I know that's a lot of work to do that, so sounds like a good group. And I'll get to know them since I'm the liaison still for the Parks and Rec, so that's cool. And then we have the Senior Citizen Advisory Commission. Councilmember Edwards and I interviewed the candidates for that, and he'll report.
Yeah, we had two candidates, and that commission has really been doing a lot of work. We've gotten really good candidates over the last three cycles on that. And we have Linda Gu returning, who has been a 22-year resident and is really involved in a lot of senior issues, not just here in Healdsburg, but throughout the county. I'm glad she's coming back for another one. And we had a really good, and this is really encouraging, Ann Mansfield, who has been in Healdsburg for 4 years, really wants to be involved in our senior committee. She comes with a lot of information. She has experience on other boards and other commissions, so that's going to be a really good fit into this, and look forward to having a full commission.
Yeah, they're both really impressive. And also in the process, realizing how much activity there actually is happening now, more some relationship with Corazon and the Latino community and the senior community, as well as Enzo Village, people are getting more and more involved. So they're talking about collaboration with them as well. So I think that's really exciting. So do you want to make a motion for that?
I make a motion that we appoint Linda Go and Ann Mansfield to this.
Second.
Oh, wait, I have to go to public comment first. Public comment? No. So could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. And then new business item B, appointments of the City Selection Committee and Mayors and Council Members Association Board of Directors. Raina, do you have a report on this?
I do have a short one. I have broken out the city selection committee and board of director appointments into 2 slides. So on this slide, you guys can review the letters of interest and make a decision on who you're going to direct the mayor to support at the upcoming February 13th meeting. And then we'll move to the next one.
I would like to suggest that we support the one candidate, Brian Barnacle, for the 1 seat, since there is no competition in that category besides Brian Barnacle, and he's currently in the role doing a great job.
I would support
I
that.
go with that. And I would recommend Gerard Giudice on the Golden Gate Bridge.
And I would too.
I support that as well.
He's awesome.
I would support Jackie.
Yeah, okay. We can just do it this way, and then we'll go to public comment.
Okay, on this one, I did want to make one comment about appointments. On this slide, I've broken up the SMART seats into 2 sections. The first seat being the seat where the representative must also sit on SCTA. Councilmember Kelly has applied for this seat. The second seat is the non-SCTA appointment, and Vice Mayor Herod has applied for this seat. On February 13th, when the mayors and council members board of directors consider these appointments, the SCTA seat will go first. If Councilmember Kelly gets selected for the SCTA seat, it will make Vice Mayor Herod ineligible for the non-SCTA. We recommend selecting an alternative for the non-SCTA seat if this situation occurs. That's it.
Thank you for that. So before we go to that, how about we've got 1 seat, Jackie Elward. That seems like a possibility.
I support that.
Okay. And then the Ag Preservation and Open Space, 1 seat. We've got 4 candidates.
I would support Margie.
I would like to. I support Frank Quint.
I like Alex. So, okay. Is this, oh, and then let's move on here to the SMART, the SCTA. I think this is a tough one. Maybe Ariel Kelly would be one we want to choose.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell.
And for the second seat, I would support Gerard Giudice on this.
I did receive word today that he's actually withdrawing from interest in this seat.
Really? Why?
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't speak with him directly, but I do know, given the kind of dynamics between SMART, Golden Gate Bridge, and his role on SCTA, I think it might be a lot of hats. But I have served with Janice Cater Thompson, as well as Todd Lands is new joining SCTA. But as you all know, I think our priorities for SMART in getting the train to North County and getting the train committed all the way to Cloverdale. I know obviously Mayor Lands will be a extremely strong advocate for getting the train north. I've seen Janice, and I think this is a little bit of a tricky one because given that it's the SCTA seat, or there's 2 SCTA seats to SMART, it's really incumbent that the person understands how SCTA functions and the kind of Janice Cater Thompson has been an incredible advocate for Healdsburg when we've had challenging votes, especially when it comes to, apportioning funding for the smaller cities. She has really stepped up strong in supporting Healdsburg and ensuring that we're getting our projects funded. And even though I think, to be totally fair and transparent, there is this conversation happening about SMART going east-west over Highway 37. And so a lot of folks, especially people who commute, the Vallejo to Marin commute and in South County, they're very focused on that because it will, serve their residents. I mean, not to say that there aren't North County residents that also commute east-west, but I think it's been really important that whoever sits in that seat, that we're going to fulfill the commitment Cloverdale before we start adding on new destinations east-west. And so I know that has been a commitment that Janice Cater Thompson has made. Certainly Mayor Lands would also, be an advocate for that as well. And I know they've both made those commitments pretty clear.
My thoughts, absolutely, Councilmember Kelly, on SMART. And then I would lean toward Todd Lands in Cloverdale because I think we need as much pull coming up north. And honestly, I'm really happy to see him put in for Cloverdale because for the longest time I'd heard, different things on Cloverdale, like there wasn't a whole lot of motivation. So it's nice to see that he's stepping forward to take on that role to help pull the SMART train. It's right now the funding allocation we're working on is through Healdsburg up
That's
to Lake
right.
Springs.
Yeah.
So we need to keep that going all the way up. So I'd support that.
Could I make a recommendation to Mayor Mitchell that if the council decides to support my candidacy, that we support Mayor Lands, but if he doesn't have the broader support, that we give Mayor Mitchell the flexibility to also support Janice Cater Thompson from Petaluma? Is that okay?
Yeah, but I misunderstood what you're talking about with Janice, is that, if she's got a lot of experience on SCTA, I thought that was something that you were suggesting would be a good thing to
It
have
is,
her?
yes, certainly.
I recommend Janice Cade Thompson also.
Okay.
Yeah, and that is one, I would say, drawback because Mayor Lands just is now joining SCTA. He hasn't actually been able to join yet because our first meeting that he'll be on is next week. So while I do think he will be a strong advocate for SMART in North County, I think, through the lens of SCTA, I think that still is yet to kind of be developed because he's new, but I'm sure he will do a great job. But that's just I would say the one, given that it's an SCTA seat, having someone with SCTA experience certainly is also, a component of that.
So is that your recommendation, her and you?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
And it
second
is
that.
also yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so not Todd.
I do support Mayor Lands as well, but I do think that given that it's, if there was a jump ball, I would support Janice Cater Thompson. But I do think that Mayor Lands would do a great job. And especially given that our number one priority is getting the train north, I don't think anyone's going to fight harder than someone who wants it to get through Healdsburg and get it to Cloverdale. So I think the flexibility that you could have during the vote, depending on how, the chips fall, would be fine with me.
Yeah, I would rank it Councilmember Kelly, Mayor Lands, and then, I haven't gotten anything. Did we get something official that said Gerard is out?
No.
We did not.
Okay.
I know Petaluma had their vote tonight as well, and so I was. That's the hearsay that I'm repeating here, but I did not hear that from him directly. No.
So, okay, so just to close the loop on this one, I think we're obviously Ariel, and then Janice, and then Todd, I think is kind of what we've got three people suggesting here, right? So that Todd would be the third choice.
And the only reason I appreciate your comments about the lack of experience with SCTA, however, I think having, Representative Huffman has been very clear, like it's going to Cloverdale. And I think having that representative that can speak to Cloverdale, be a representative to, generate the excitement and interest and also work at that level to pull the train all the way up to Cloverdale. Cloverdale, I think, symbolically is really important to show like Cloverdale is in on this because that's not the message that I've been hearing from Cloverdale for a while. So I think that's a big statement, and I think it should be supported, especially with us being, right there.
So, okay, that's a strong argument, but I don't agree with it.
Okay.
I got a much stronger letter from Janice Cade Thompson than I did from Cloverdale.
So we're saying Ariel, Janice, Todd, right? And the things could change once we get to the vote too. We don't know what'll happen, right? They may not have the support, or they may have plenty of it. So let's just, if that's the order, we can, well, we can agree there. Then the next one, if we're assuming that Ariel wins, but if she, well, I hate to say it this way, but if
How
she
about this? If I
doesn't,
don't, I would like to support
we
seeing
want Chris,
Mayor
right?
Herod.
For
Yes.
sure.
But
You
if
know, we
she
support. Chris.
does get it, I would like to support Sylvia Lemus.
Okay. I don't really have much of an opinion on on the others, so I was just kind of going for Chris, you know?
Yeah, that was the obvious, but I did not know that there would be if Councilmember Kelly got it, that it would knock Councilmember Herod,
Right.
Vice Mayor Herod off. So I was fully coming in tonight supporting
Those two.
Yeah.
those two.
I do want to just, I think Sylvia Lemus is fantastic. I've worked with her for a long time. There's a couple of reasons why I would support that, but with a caveat, so Sylvia would be the first person ever from Cotati to serve on SMART. She would also be the first Latina. However, Victoria Fleming, as our MTC rep, MTC controls all of the funding for all of our transit and transportation projects for Sonoma County, for the region. And Victoria, having a seat on SMART and being our county's MTC representative will undoubtedly lead to a more likely funding scenario where we get the train here and through Healdsburg to Cloverdale sooner. I do see how effective she has been on MTC. Even just, for a decade, we couldn't get SMART into Plan Bay Area. And that was why we weren't getting any funding through MTC. And in her role in just the past, I think 4 years being our MTC representative, she has moved mountains on that body and really proven to be an incredibly effective policymaker and deal maker to help our region. So I truly think that it would benefit Healdsburg probably the most. And unfortunately, that's where I'm approaching this from, is what's the best for our local residents, to have Victoria on there. Also, as a representative of the largest city in the region and the 5th largest city in the Bay Area, it seems odd to me to not have a Santa Rosa representative on there, just because we've had such great Santa Rosa representation. And they do have a lot of seats at a lot of other, powerful tables. So I would like to see Victoria have a seat on the non-SCTA seat on SMART, if possible.
And to me, it was very important, the personal outreach, to have a conversation and to see what somebody was thinking and what they were doing. That's why I'm going with Lemus.
Councilmember Hagley, what do you think?
I mean, I think this one, I'd probably support Victoria just based on the experience. So.
Yeah, I
would support Chris Herod, obviously, but
right.
he's ineligible. I do want to let you know that I reached out to Gerard and he has not withdrawn from that seat. So that is not the case. He said no. He said no. LOL. Rumors are crazy.
So before we make a final decision on all this, let me open it up to public comment.
Yeah. Was that the last one?
I think so. Is that the last? Yeah. And seeing nobody rushing forward, we'll bring it back and let's see if they're not final decisions. These are just I get to vote, my authorization to vote. Okay. And so did we do the ag? Did we decide on that? No, we didn't, right? No. But we did Jackie Elward in the one seat. So we've got Karen New, Marjorie Morgenstern, Frank Quint, or Alex DeCarly for one seat. What say you?
I'd say Alex.
I'd say Frank.
I say Marjorie.
We did this before. I'd say Alex. So that's 2. Does that get us anywhere? No, not with 4 people.
I think we need an alternate because, you get down there. I think let's come up with a second.
Yeah.
Alex
because
would be my second. Alex would be my second.
Okay.
Can I ask someone to make a case for Alex? I'm just curious what's drawing you guys there.
He introduced himself to us at the last meeting, and I've seen him at several meetings. He's very engaged, as best I.
And he has a lot of agriculture background.
Yeah, so he's really, he's a kind of a go-getter. I don't know the others at all. So, full disclosure. Does that case help? Councilmember Kelly, yeah? Okay. So we decided then Alex DeCarli as first and Frank Quint second. Was that the
No, we had one and
consensus?
one. I supported Marjorie as my second. I serve on the Russian River Watershed Association with her.
You do? Okay. Okay.
I didn't find her letter to be particularly moving, but I do. I mean, I think looking at DeCarli's background, that to me makes a ton of sense, and I support that you guys. That's where you guys are leaning. We couldn't have two people from the same city. And it's just, there's only one seat anyway, so that doesn't matter. But I do think a lot of the projects and I sat on the Ag and Open Space Advisory Committee for 2 years. A lot of the projects and a lot of the things that were reviewed are in South County. Like there's a ton of those projects that really it's oftentimes pretty central to down there. So I think having someone from Petaluma on there would make a ton of sense. When I sat on there, Brian Barnacle from Petaluma was also on there. I don't recall who there's two city members that are on the advisory.
Ask, like, who else is on there?
I know it used to be Nisa, but she's not on there anymore. And it used to be Brian Barnacle, and I don't think he's on there anymore. I don't think Nisa's still on there. So yeah, that would just be curious to kind of see where the geographic representation is. But
and is one of them appointed by the Board of Supervisors?
There's many that are appointed by the board. No,
for this.
I think she was one of the city. I feel like we voted for her at one point in time. In 2020, we voted for her because her and I were two of the people that had applied.
The current members who sit on the Sonoma County Ag is Mark Stapp and Kevin McDonnell.
Oh, so we're Petaluma oversubscribed, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So they're out.
I don't think the rule applies to them, though. I think you can have two people from the same city on there. I don't know. It's an interesting observation, though. Maybe it's just a smart rule.
I believe this seat may be filling John Shrib's seat. I apologize. There's 3 seats, 2 from Petaluma, 1 from Santa Rosa that currently sit.
So right now there's 2 from Petaluma.
Petaluma likes this position.
Apparently not.
I feel good with mine.
So I don't know what.
I mean, if that's the case,
what are we doing here?
I kind of feel like it's the mayor's choice when you get down there.
Okay.
Yeah, I do
Navigate
support
through
Alex.
this.
I can read the room when I get there.
Yeah.
Okay. But Alex is sort of the top choice, even though he's from Petaluma.
Yeah.
That's all right. Okay. So are you taking notes on all this, Marina, so I'll know what to do? Thank you. And did we determine the 2 seats? Ariel Kelly, Janice Cater Thompson, and then Todd Lands, that in that order.
Well,
right?
I
brought new
like
information.
Gerard. I think Gerard's done a great
right.
job with it. And I've
Gerard is
known
not
a
on
long time. Or the Golden Gate Bridge, sorry.
I actually completely with respect to financial challenges, like the Golden Gate Bridge District was apportioning funds away from Sonoma County, and we ended up having to take a very controversial vote at SCTA to advocate for getting more funding from MTC off of a terrible agreement that was struck 30 years ago that no one was willing to renegotiate. And I found that his advocacy, not in support of our cities, but in support of the Golden Gate Bridge District, really showed kind of the conflicts that exist when you wear many hats for multiple agencies. And so I would have concerns. I really like Gerard as a person. I think he's incredibly smart, professional, but I do have concerns when people are wearing multiple competing hats in how they're going about making priority decisions for our region. And I can't say with confidence that I think he would be a stronger advocate than Janice would in supporting getting the train here, especially with the competing interests of going east-west and where Rohnert Park sits in the region. So I really admire and respect him, but I think professionally and I don't believe that that's going to be the best thing for our community.
I actually had the opposite experience in conversation with him, and he was very adamant about the commitment to get the that is the priority, and that's the focus of this. So I still would advocate for Gerard, and I've known a long time and would support him in there.
Okay, so you're saying Ariel, Gerard, and then,
No, for
No.
me, I think it's North County first. So I would say Ariel, number one, Todd,
Okay.
two, the alternate would be Gerard.
I
for me.
see. Okay, okay. Ron?
I really think that Janice would do a good job on that, and so I would go Ariel Kelly 1, Janice Cater Thompson 2, and Gerard 3.
We're going to be at another 2-2 on this. Lord, I want to go home.
It's up to you.
Well, not really, because, I mean, so obviously we know Ariel's in on our board here. I think very highly of Gerard. I don't really know Todd in any way. He didn't reach out to me. Janice did several times and talked on the phone, and very impressive. So I would say Ariel, Janice, Gerard.
Yeah.
Does that get any kind of consensus going here?
Yes.
Well, you and me.
Yeah, there's two for Gerard. I meant to Janice.
Yeah,
Right.
but we need more than that because it's a tie.
Well, but I mean, we're
Or
talking
does it,
about
do we?
1 and 2 because there's 3 for Janice as second, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so there's it's Ariel, Janice, and then, I mean,
We'll
you
see.
got
if-
Gerard or Todd be on there.
Okay,
Yeah, so I would
we're
support.
good, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking at Raina.
I'm just confirming, Ariel Kelly, Janice Cater Thompson, and I missed the third.
I think it's Gerard. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then the last one, the non-SCTA seat is, I have it as Councilmember Harrod would be your first choice if Councilmember Kelly is not selected. And then I don't believe we had majority or consensus on the second, but I think you were leaning towards Councilmember Fleming.
Yes, I think we were. I would go for Victoria Fleming.
Same.
So that's 3 and 1.
But
So
if she
yeah.
didn't,
Yeah, okay. Okay, as our, but there's only one seat, right?
But did you say if Victoria doesn't get it?
so say Chris is ineligible
Uh-huh.
and Victoria doesn't ultimately have enough votes, I would support Sylvia Lemus
Yeah.
for sure.
I would agree with that.
Same.
Okay. Yay.
We got to like come up with all this scenarios.
And then we won't think about it again. So, okay, I think we're done with that one. And now we're on to council reports on matters of interest occurring since previous meeting. Who would like to start us off? Anybody?
I'll go.
Okay.
I was at the Senior Advisory Committee meeting, and it was a very,
We did.
You did, okay.
very good meeting. They went over their goals, and they have completed a lot of their goals, continuing to work on a lot of outreach with Enzo and Healdsburg Senior Center. They actually, our senior citizen, our Park and Rec staff had a meeting with Enzo staff. That went very well. Their efforts on diversity and inclusion, they've done a lot of outreach with Corazon with their Hispanic output. Also working with seniors aging gracefully. One of the very interesting things that came up at the meeting that kind of ties in with their endowment work is a member of the community, Ms. Taylor, is working on a graceful end of life process. Because one of the things that the senior center gets asked a lot is, what do I do now? So they are working on coming up with a program and providing information for people to have graceful end of life, which I think is very important with our aging.
Is that the Taya Levine project?
Yes.
Okay,
Kay
great.
Levine. Yes, I could not get her first name, and I didn't want to call her wrong on the thing. Also did the community districting meeting up at the community center, which Everyone was there. That was a very good meeting. In fact, that led to the meeting with our city manager, meeting with Corazon to do that. And then with the community electric meeting, it was not well attended, but there was a lot of information that I think some things that we need to be aware of, requirements that are going to be coming. We heard a little bit about it, the daylight charging time, that we need to offset the times of charging because people get home at 6 and want to plug in. So that'll be something that we'll need to be looking at coming forward. So that's been my time.
Awesome. Thank you. Ariel?
I attended a couple meetings at Sonoma State regarding their recent decision to slash a number of programs and staffing positions. I attended the Farm Bureau Crab Feed last weekend and got to see a number of Healdsburg's 4-H and FFA students volunteering at the event. It's a really heartwarming. Raises critical scholarship funds for a lot of kids that are on ag career pathways or working in doing 4-H and FFA. So wonderful event. I saw Councilmember Hagley there as well. And also, I have not had a chance to go to any of the redistricting meetings, but I have had a number of phone calls from people who are very interested and engaged in this process. And I feel like always Healdsburg just really shows up for all of these process things and gets involved. So great to see. And then today I had the opportunity to represent Healdsburg at the City Selection Committee meeting in Santa Rosa, which was a fascinating adventure. Thanks.
Councilmember Hagley.
And I got to be there in the audience to watch it. I only have a couple of things. I attended the NCPA Strategic Issues Conference last week, 2 weeks ago in Sacramento. One of the, I was talking to one of the commissioners, and one of his thoughts is, we always are concerned about the grid and efficiency and the laws that are coming down, and one of his, these are his personal talking points, not NCPA's, but he gets frustrated that he wants to remind some of the elected leaders either at the federal or state level is, hey, the grid is not a laboratory. The customers are not lab rats. Quit trying, we don't need to just use the grid for experiments and everything. We need to focus on efficiency, reliability, and affordability and things like that. So that was kind of an interesting comment that kind of stuck in my head. It's like, okay, good. As we have good ideas, let's really think about what we put on the grid. And then I attended the 2025 Economic Perspective Breakfast in Rohnert Park, which was really interesting. Talked about there was a professor that was there talking about some of the climate and open space and how traditionally the value of the resources have been valued based on the extraction value versus the value of keeping it in place. And it was kind of an interesting way to think about some of those issues. So, I mean, that's really what I had.
Thank you. And my big deal was the breakfast with the mayor at the chamber up in the villa, which was fun and beautiful. They did a great job. They coordinated the color of my picture outfit with the tablecloths and napkins. It was beautiful. Unfortunately,
Wear that same outfit?
no, I thought about it, but I didn't have it anymore. And unfortunately, you guys couldn't attend. I know you would have hopefully wanted to be there, but because of the new ruling, we couldn't have a quorum of the council. So Council Member or Vice Mayor Herod was there to support. And anyway, I spent a lot of staff time helping me get that presentation put together, as well as my own time. So I'm glad it's over, but it was fun, I have to say. So that's all I got. So with that, where's my gavel? Oh, I will adjourn this meeting at 8:59.